welcome to a new episode of the Game Informer Show. I'm your host, Ben Hanson, joined as always by trusty sidekick and co-host Timothy Turi.
Hello, and hello for watching another episode of the Game Informer Show podcast.
Hello for watching.
Yeah, hello.
And we got a couple more
Hello
guests
for
here.
watching.
We got the great Brian Shea.
Hello.
I take back the great part, it slipped out. And then we got Kim Wallace.
Hello.
Do you like Kimberley?
It doesn't matter. Growing up, it was always Kim, and then as I got older, I thought I should just go with the whole name.
You did it.
But does it ever make you think of like Burley?
No, but now it will.
No, it does.
Yeah.
Okay. People like to call me Timberly sometimes.
It's funny. You were a great Timbo Slice before Kim came on, then it became Kimbo Slice.
I think Kimbo Slice is a little bit. I think it's a solid one.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I feel like Helgeson always fell into this rut of talking about people's names when introducing them, and it always annoyed me because it always took forever. But it's really hard not to do it because you have to like think about everybody's names as you're introducing them on this.
I don't know about you, but I loved Matt Helgeson.
Oh, I loved him too. God damn it!
I couldn't resist.
Come home, Matt.
Yeah.
Anyways, we should talk about this episode of the show.
Yeah,
I think it's
Ben
gonna be a good
Hanson.
one. Oh, that's so sweet. So we're going to talk a little bit about Tony Hawk Pro Skater 5. We're going to talk LEGO Dimensions. We're going to talk Witcher 3 DLC, NBA 2K16, a bunch of other stuff. Tim, I don't know what the hell you got on your docket.
About what I've been playing?
Yeah, but
okay.
we should save it because the end of the show, for the final segment, we have a long interview with Jake Solomon, who's the creative director on XCOM 2.
Yeah,
nice.
over at Firaxis.
Yeah, and he also was the creative director for Enemy Unknown. He's been at Firaxis for a million years.
I had never met Jake before, and he is a delight. Super funny, super open, like makes his points pretty clearly, but like, I don't know, he's just really down to earth and funny and humbling and also inspiring at the same time. It's he's got a good deal going on there.
He's one of the most charming people in the industry.
That's a good way
for
to
sure.
summarize that.
And so we talk a little bit about the development history of XCOM 2 and just kind of his overall philosophy towards game development. Not as nitty gritty in the details of XCOM 2, but some interesting stuff still comes out of it. Yeah, for sure. All right, but to kick things off, the big thing it seems like people are talking about this week is Tony Hawk Pro Skater 5. Is it a full disaster? What's going on with this, Brian Shea?
I'm thinking that, I've played it for a few hours now, and I haven't encountered any like crazy glitches that I'm seeing posted all over the internet. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's because maybe they're playing on the Xbox One copy and I'm on PS4. But yeah, I mean, I've had a couple things where like a guy like skates into a wall and he just kind of gets stuck there for a second, or like, you know, he'll fall and he'll just bounce 30 feet into the air.
These are all just classic nods to the PlayStation 1 classic.
Obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, which apparently at this point seems like it was more stable than this game.
Right. The
Years
weird
later.
undulating textures
Yeah.
and everything they had back in the day. So just to be clear, Matthew Cotto is reviewing Tony Hawk.
Yes, he is.
For us. You just were helping him out with the review, so you played a little bit of it.
Mm-hmm.
But with this game, I just wonder how much people were preloading, like, this is going to be a disaster. And now it's like, oh, here's a bunch of glitches. Let's upload this. Like, every once in a while, there's that game that comes out that seems like the internet's ready to just dogpile on. And it seems like this is in the eye of Sauron right now.
I feel like, too, there's like a lot of nostalgia for it. And so people come in with these expectations, or you think, oh, this game was so great back in the day. And no matter what they would have done, it wouldn't have kind of matched up to that.
Yeah, there's certainly part of that. I think we went through that so much with the HD kind of sort of remake that happened a while ago, which was the same developer where everybody got their hopes up and then it's like, oh, this sucks.
And you got to look at, from the outside perspective, like they changed art styles really dramatically, like at a pretty late point in development. And like, that's always, in some cases, it's very good. Look at like Borderlands or something like that. But other times it's like, well, what's going on there?
I think they're just trying to mask the fact that it really looks like a PS2 era game.
I wouldn't say that.
texture-wise. All right, let's say.
I'd say early PS3 maybe.
Yeah, all right.
Which
all
still
right.
isn't great.
That still is not
Let's be
great.
perfectly clear.
Yeah, are you having a good time with it?
I think it's kind of a fun throwback to like, you know, the original numbered entries of the Tony Hawk series. But, you know, that said, I was playing for like a few hours last night and it did start feeling a little monotonous. I was only on the second level, and it's weird because there are still some of those like retro features where it's like I played like as one skater for a while and unlocked the next level. And then I went to be like, oh, let me try out Tony Hawk and see how he plays. And you had to start all over. Like every single character, you have to unlock the missions and stuff as you go with that character.
Are there huge differences between the characters?
No, you can actually customize their attributes. You can customize how they look and everything. It's weird because you can't create a skater, but you can change like, okay, I want to put a different head on Lil Wayne's a character in the game. I want to put a different head on Lil Wayne's body.
Different Lil Wayne brain?
I wasn't
Yes.
expecting that.
I wasn't either. There's Lil Wayne, and then there's also the King from King's Quest, who
King Graham is in it.
Yeah.
I guess Activision. I mean, that's clever. I like that. Does his feather move? Does his feather have physics?
I haven't unlocked him yet, but he's sitting on the character select screen, and you can see him. It just has the big deadbolt lock thing over top, or padlock.
Is it the young version of him?
Young version.
Yeah, I like that. They're kind of harkening back to Spider-Man being the game and all sorts of wacky characters like that. But of the entire Activision roster, interesting to go with King Graham.
I grew up loving King's Quest, and I grew up really liking Tony Hawk, but at no point was there ever just like, damn, we got to get some royalty in here. We got to get some King's Quest royalty on this skateboard, bring some dignity to this situation. Like King's Quest, King Graham's a fine character within the context of King's Quest, but ain't nobody talking about, hey, King Graham versus Master Chief. What's going on there?
Ain't nobody talking about King's Quest in general. I feel like that game came out and everyone's like, it's pretty good, and now there's no buzz for the upcoming ones.
I mean, I think that the nostalgia for that series. Wow, we really sidestepped here. Anyway, I was just going to say is like King's Quest is well respected and remembered from like big point and click adventure fans, but it didn't have the reach that LucasArts did like in those games. Like it's I don't know. It's
that
tough.
could be kind of circling back to Tony Hawk 5. It could be the same thing where, people look back on those with like all this nostalgic love, but then they go to play like the updated version that remains true to it. And it's like, oh, maybe it's not as, great as I look back at it with my rose tinted glasses.
Yeah.
But it certainly seems like it needs some more time. Like, I don't know if you guys watched the Conan O'Brien Clueless Gamer segment on it.
No, I did miss that one.
It was interesting just because there's some hints that this game might be in pretty rough shape, and Tony Hawk was showing it off, and Conan immediately is just like, at the character select screen, Tony Hawk chooses Tony Hawk, of course, and then Conan's just like, look at his dead eyes. Look at the dead eyes there. And Tony Hawk's like trying to joke about like, oh, I have dead eyes in real life. And Conan's like, no, just in the game. Look at that. And then
just trying to dive into it.
Yeah, and then he's like ragdolling around the level, and Conan's like, look at that weird twitching leg. And Tony Hawk's like, oh, basically like jumping in front of the screen, like, don't mind that.
That's a weird combo.
Oh, man.
Because Conan, I mean, he usually plays some pretty polished games.
Exactly.
Like, he's usually making fun of a game that otherwise, like, he's taking a really like non-gamer perspective on like just focusing on like laser focus on this one really weird part of the game, but other than that, the game performs flawlessly.
Yeah, it's usually like massive AAA titles like Mortal Kombat X, Halo 5, what was the Witcher 3 was another big one that he did this year. But like, yeah, Tony Hawk 5 is kind of a weird fit.
Yeah.
Activision's got the sweet cash, I guess, to dish out to get it on that show, I guess is how it works. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing that kind of clicked this game into place is apparently this is the last year that Activision has the Tony Hawk Pro Skater license or the Tony Hawk skateboarding license. And so you got to wonder if it's like Robomoto was not ready, they needed more time, but like we have to get it out this year no matter what.
I think it's just a matter of time, man. I think that given the rise of VR, that we're going to see people standing on real skateboards with a VR headset in their living room.
That sounds dangerous.
I'm just it sounds like the worst idea possible.
Worst idea.
Yeah.
But the question is then, like, if this is the last year that Activision has the Tony Hawk license, are they just, I don't know, salting the earth? So whoever picks it up next would be like, oh, well, it's a burned franchise at this point.
I think most people that love a series that much, and most people that like games in general, are smart enough to understand that it's changed hands. It's a different publisher now, and then with that, usually a different developer and stuff. I think most people could discern that.
Maybe.
And
maybe.
I think like a lot of people would love to see EA pick it up and maybe like kind of put the Skate franchise and merge it with the Tony Hawk franchise.
Are you a big Skate fan?
I never really got into those games,
Okay.
but I know a lot of people are like, oh, just bring on Skate 4 with this piece of crap out in the marketplace now, like Tony Hawk 5.
Yeah, it really did bring up Skate. And then didn't they discount it on one of the stores?
Did they?
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, they
yeah,
did?
yeah, right after this Tony Hawk debacle came.
That's
and I was
super
like,
smart.
That is.
Yeah, it is super smart just to see if people probably gauging if they are interested in
And
it.
I saw Devolver Digital, who published Ollie Ollie.
Ollie.
Yeah, they tweeted out like, Tony Hawk sucks. Buy Ollie Ollie 2. All right, well, just getting right to it.
Indie developer, say what you want there. That's awesome.
Really just go nuts.
I don't know. At this point, the Tony Hawk name means nothing after it's out of Activision's hands. I mean, as far as game development goes, like they built it up and then they squandered it. So after that, it's just like, well, who wants to make a good skateboarding game? It has nothing to do with the legacy, I think, at this point.
What's your Tony Hawk, Tim? What's your favorite?
I think, honestly, 3 was the one that, like, that Foundry, just like constant nonstop grinds around the Foundry is like I could do that for just hours and hours.
All I did all through high school, like that was my big thing, was the Tony Hawk games, and I don't even know how I got into them because I wasn't a skateboarding fan. But you picked it up and you played it, and they were just so much fun to just skate around.
Good.
The music was always the best.
Music was so good.
Oh yeah, and it makes me just so sad to think now. Just if you think about where the series has went from like that time, like into all the peripherals, and then trying to go throwback, and this is just like an ultimate like disaster as it sounds.
Was it Tony Hawk 4 that brought things open world?
Or is that Underground?
I think that might have been Underground.
Was it?
Or was that Underground, or was it like American Wasteland?
I actually liked Wasteland. Was not the best, but I actually really liked it because it was kooky.
I like Project 8
You're
for that
building
same
a freaking amusement park, so
like a mother base.
Yeah, you're getting like all these parts and stuff. It was fun.
Project 8 was weird because like you could slow down time and like use the sticks on the PS3 controller to like rotate the board and like in like bullet time.
Man, that sounds like late franchise gimmicky implementation.
Oh, it was, and then they went straight to pretty much ride.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel like I really trailed off after 3 even. I never really even played 4, but I spent the most time with 1. And I don't know, it's one of those mistakes. I never picked up 2 on PS1. Like, if I could go back in time, I just would have shoved that down my throat.
You know, I know 2 was like one of those games that everyone just really dived into and really loved. And I think a lot of people would say Tony Hawk 2 is like maybe the high point for them. But I'm the same way that like 2 I got on like my Dreamcast. And I was like, I got it at a point where I was like, all right, I'm done with Sonic and Resident Evil Code Veronica and anything that I wanted a Dreamcast for. And like I was phasing out my Dreamcast, and like I got Tony Hawk towards the end of that, so I just didn't catch it.
I like the idea of Baby Tim going, well, I'm done with Sonic and Resident Evil the rest of my life.
Well, it was the rest of the Dreamcast life anyway. I saw the writing on the wall.
Yeah, what did it say?
By PlayStation 2.
Perfect. It was a shining beacon.
It was my mom wrote it in lipstick. She sleepwalked thing.
So is there any chance you'd recommend this for $60, Brian?
Not for $60, no. I mean, obviously, I'm not the one doing the review, but I would not pay $60 for it. It's a fun throwback, but it's little more than that. Like, if I don't know like what conditions the other people are playing on. I'm not seeing as many glitches as everyone else apparently, but like for the level of polish that I've seen, even in my game, which has been fairly clean, it's definitely not a $60 game. I would say wait for like, if you're a big fan of the series, maybe $30.
Yeah,
Sure.
And then of course also wait for Kato's review because Kato's played.
Kato's played a lot more than I have
to death, so he'll have a good perspective on it. He's a straight shooter, that Matt Kato.
Yes, he is.
Most definitely.
Yes.
So I've been playing a lot of a game that came out, was it over the weekend or on Friday last week? But we haven't covered it yet on the show, but it's Lego Dimensions.
Yeah.
Which is one of those games that I found myself getting more and more excited about. Like, I'd just be watching TV with somebody and a Ghostbusters thing would come up and I'd be like, hey, have you heard about this game Lego Dimensions where you can play as one of the Ghostbusters and go through this crazy world?
But also Scooby-Doo and Portal and Back to the Future.
And the Simpsons.
And Jurassic World.
I found myself like this energy building within me like, God, I'm really looking forward to this game. So last night I finally popped it in after awkwardly taking all of the Lego sets from the office here and trying to put them in my backpack and bike home. And I could hear like the Lego pieces falling apart as I was biking home.
But I almost feel like at that point, because if people don't know, you have to construct like the portal yourself. Sort of think like any other of the Toys to Life stuff like Skylanders and whatnot. You have to have this portal and you build it up and it's really cool looking. And you have to build up other sets depending on how involved they are.
They're all pretty small.
Yeah, but there's still that degree of like, one of the things that I'm so fascinated about it is the idea of like, I'm going to go to the store, like that minifig looks awesome and I like this guy. I'm going to build it, but then and put it together, but then it goes into the game after you build it. Obviously, it doesn't know if you've actually built the thing correctly or not completely, but wouldn't you want to just break all those down, Ben, and then just build them from scratch?
I would, but I didn't have that much time. I kind of wanted to get into it. And like in Reiner's review, he mentions that like building the portal takes 15 minutes. And it is weird when I have all the pieces together because you just put the little toy on there. Or sometimes even when you pop a new character on, say you pop Owen, Owen Good from Jurassic World.
Oh,
classic character. When you pop like Owen on, a digital instruction booklet will pop up for building the Lego Raptor. So if it's already built or you don't have that or don't care, it's just constantly popping up little digital booklets where you have to like leaf through every single page. And it is literally just a Lego booklet. It's not like an interactive movie or anything like that.
Weird.
It's a really bizarre game. And that kind of gets to the overall point of just the structure of this game is really bizarre. So I went into it just really wanting to play the Portal stuff. That's what I was the most interested in. And so the experience is you start out, you have to do the Wizard of Oz section. That's like where the story begins.
Okay.
But we've talked about it before on the show, but it's funny. There's like that line, where obviously Batman is confused and thinks that Scarecrow is Scarecrow. And he never stops complaining about the world and how bright it is and how everything's too colorful. And he's like, obviously it's Scarecrow's hallucinations.
And this is Will Arnett's Batman?
No, it's Troy Baker's, but he does encounter early on Will Arnett's Batman, and then they have a fight.
So this is the Lego Batman.
Yes.
Not the Lego movie Batman.
Correct.
Gotcha.
It's very
I'm on board.
specific.
Okay.
There's also a great line, too, where Dorothy runs up to him and she's explaining what's going on. Like, oh, well, this guy doesn't have a heart. This guy doesn't have a brain. She's like, what are you missing? And he goes, a sense of humor.
I thought you were going to go like, my parents.
That would have been good.
Oh, gosh.
That really would have been smart.
Great for a Lego game.
So you have to go through that. And then it gets really confusing. There's a couple layers of confusion for this game for me. But like the portal just keeps flashing a certain color. And it's like it wants you... It's trying to train you, I think, to constantly swap the pieces, which you have to do a lot of in
just
this
reminding
game.
you that the portal exists.
But it's confusing. Like, there are 3 of us playing it last night, staring at this flashing portal going, I don't know what you want from me. Like, it's not progressing in the game. There's no guide on the TV telling you what you're supposed to be doing. And I'm literally grabbing handfuls of these characters and moving them around different spots in this portal. Like, how do I keep playing this game? And then another confusing thing.
Well, I mean, it wasn't stopping your progress, was it?
It was, yeah.
Oh, it was?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
There are weird gates like that. And maybe the 3 of us were complete idiots. Who can say?
Most likely.
Yeah. But they're trying to train you in the beginning to swap characters around in an interesting way that... So there's like a fight with the Wicked Witch of the West. And then she kind of like binds you down. And then to free your character from like her spell, you have to move to a different spot. I remember, Kim, you did this.
Yeah.
So you have to like that's the training that you should constantly be swapping these characters around. But even that, it's like, well, I'm stuck. I can't do anything. I guess you just are supposed to figure out that you have to move the thing to another piece of the portal.
Oh, like that's how you escape it? Is your character teleports, basically?
It feels like, not physically, but you physically move the character to teleport it out of the state it's in within the game world.
Is it relative to where it was placed on the portal?
No,
is that the direction they move?
No, not even that. But it reminds me of like, I don't know, Psycho Mantis and beating him in the second controller port or something. So it's
I like that.
kind of interesting.
So this is a 4-player game, up to 4 players?
No, just
you
2.
said 3 of us playing.
Oh, well, we were like swapping controllers around. And we
okay.
needed somebody just to help try and figure out what the hell this game's trying to communicate to us. Because maybe it's just, I'm not that familiar with Toys to Life, and maybe kids, it's just second nature to them at this point. But
I mean, the way I played like Skylanders and stuff is I was trying to like, I want to build up Spyro, and that's my guy. And you just switch whatever you wanted, or if there was a place that was very clearly gated, you'd need to, but it wasn't a mechanical thing that was required constantly,
Right. And again, I could be a complete idiot, but the Lego games, the puzzle designs are never that great to me. I don't know if it's a lack of focus testing. You think WB would really push it through the ringer.
They are simple to a fault in a lot of situations, I think, or sometimes too cryptic.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a weird mix.
It's either
of
one
like,
or the
I have
other.
no idea what you want me to do here, Lego game, or this is not even a puzzle. I can just walk over here and use this character for this. But it's that combined with now the physical Toys to Life thing of, well, now I don't know what to do physically. I don't know where to move things around. But getting back to the weird structure of this game, so you go through the intro, then you get dropped into kind of this hub world. And so walking around, you can see gates to all these different worlds. Like, oh, here you can go to Lord of the Rings. Here's the Midway Arcade section. Here's the Simpsons, everything like that. I just wanted Portal 2, found it in the center area, strangely, and so jumped into that, played through like the Portal stuff, which was like an hour, maybe. It's just a handful of test chambers, stuff like that. We can talk about that in a bit.
Test chambers within Portal, not our video preview series.
It's very confusing, yeah.
Test chamber.
Yeah. So then finish up that Portal level, and then it jumps you back into like another hub world, but it's all Portal themed. It's like, and then you run around. And it's like, are there more Portal levels in this space? Like, no, it's just a little hub area,
tiny little sandbox
that you can then leave that. But then I don't even know if that was the story mission that I was supposed to do. So I think there's still the story campaign stuff for Portal.
Maybe that's setting up like there might be new Portal levels later, and you come back to that.
I think you're eventually in the story mode gonna go to the Portal world, and I don't think that's the same content that we played, but it'd be weird to have two versions of it. Just the structure of this thing is a real mess.
Okay, I have some top level questions for you. What's in the set? The core set.
Oh, the core set. So it comes with Batman, Wildstyle from Lego Movie, and Gandalf. Okay. And so you can play through the entire game and the Portal thing. Yeah. And I think the Batmobile. I'm pretty sure.
Batmobile, yeah.
Yeah, there we go. And so you can play through just the story mode of the game, which will bring you to all the different play sets. So you don't need to pay if you want to experience the Portal level or the Ghostbusters level or everything like that. So it'll jump around. But what you get if you pay for those characters, obviously, is the ability to play them, and then I believe to run around their own small hub worlds. And then some of them also have an extra story campaign type mission. And
they have little quests tied to them. From what I saw when I played like Scooby-Doo, in the Scooby-Doo level, if you used him for one part, you could like dig into this section and get like in an extra room and more
all that. Studs. I mean, the classic Lego thing of, you need this character, this power to get to the secret stuff, except now it's like, hey, you need Wonder Woman. So drive out to the store, idiot.
That was my other question then, was like, then at the end of the day, besides swapping characters and having fun putting them together, this is another Lego game, just with way more licenses at its disposal.
It is. Does it take
full advantage of those licenses from what you've seen? Do you feel like it is satisfying that sort of like, oh my God, they could do so many crazy things. Batman thinks Scarecrow is a scarecrow. Like that example, like, do you feel like it's delivering?
I'm looking forward. I want to play through the entire story mode just to experience all that stuff. But yeah, it is amazing. And it makes me want to compliment the people behind this game. The developers, sure, they did a great job. But the people who had to manage these licenses, just like the glimpses we've had from our job of what a pain in the ass license holders can be and how protective they are of these characters. Think of like, we were just talking about Smash Brothers and how crazy Pac-Man, you can't change his color. It's probably a weird Namco rule. Just millions of those tiny rules. And the fact they can make all these worlds interact, like the lawyers over at TT Games deserve a pat on the back at this point. It's just amazing.
My next question is someone who's, I've only completed like maybe one Lego game. I actually don't know if I have. I've always become enamored with like the aesthetic, the charm, the humor, and then I get into it. And like this happened with Lego Jurassic Park. I think I made it through Lego Jurassic Park, and then I started Jurassic World, and like it's just too little, stretched too far. But I feel like Lego Dimensions, do you feel like the just the grab bag and the variety is keeping you more engaged than like your regular Lego game?
I think so. Yeah. Who doesn't love a good remix?
Yeah.
I mean, it's really, really fun. Right out of the gate, you're fully on board because it's the scene in Lord of the Rings where Gandalf is falling down and he's fighting Balrog like after the bridge. It gets whipped down and all that stuff, which they reuse a joke from Lego Lord of the Rings where Balrog just like burps at him.
Oh, okay.
That was kind of weird they reused that joke,
cheap.
but it's so good. They got to reuse it.
Yeah.
But anyway, so he's falling and then Batman warps in and is falling along with him, and just like seeing those two interact for the first time on top of Balrog was really satisfying.
Sounds good.
Or like you're trying to solve a portal level and Scooby-Doo just keeps going, Scooby-Dooby-Doo. It's just like a surreal mix, and it's really, really charming. I think there's going to be a lot more fun there. I'm excited to see where it goes in the future.
You think you're going to go buy any? You feeling that itch yet?
Nah, I don't think so. I mean, we got a pretty cushy gig here. The fact that I can just run in and grab them all.
Do we have all of them here?
I think we have a lot of them, yeah.
Okay.
But I wanted to test one thing, and I'm sad that I didn't take this character home, because you talk about taking advantage of the mixing and matching. In the Portal level, I was reminded of something that drove me insane about the Lego movie. Have you guys seen the Lego movie? Okay, do you remember the big joke with Benny and the spaceship, where the entire thing he's talking about spaceships? Oh, spaceship. Everybody seemed like on the internet loved that joke. And then at the end, he gets to build a spaceship. Super exciting. He gets to do what he always wanted to do. It is the exact same joke as Portal 2 and like the space personality sphere. Where he just wants to go to space the entire time, and then I don't want to spoil Portal 2, but something like that happens, and it's like the big release of like space. And it's weird because he's in the Portal 2 Lego Dimensions playset. And so it's like making the Lego company like rubbing their face in the fact that it's the exact same joke in a weird way, but I didn't have Benny, and I wanted to see if they would reference that.
Sure. Yeah. You've drawn a connection there that I'm not saying, I'm not like totally on board with like, they clearly took Benny from Portal and like just leaned into that. Like, I don't know. I don't think that they necessarily were straight on inspired by Portal 2.
No, I don't think so. It's just a weird corollary, I guess, or a weird analogy where like they're both in the same line.
Okay,
it's
gotcha.
just bizarre to see those kind of shoehorned together. But the Portal stuff, like it was short, but it's very Portal 2-y. They have Cave Johnston there, GLaDOS, like new Wheatley dialogue, which is all right. Like it doesn't really make sense lore wise. They even make some reference that like I don't know how I got back here.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. But what's frustrating, I guess, is just playing Portal from that isometric or like third person perspective because you're so used to being able to look all around, and especially playing split screen, where if you know the Lego split screen, where it kind of has that seamless divide is what it goes for. And so if you're split up at all, the character who's playing cello has to shoot portals all around, can't really see that much at all. And it's frustrating because if the screen is divided a little bit in that split screen, then you can't move the cursor to the other side of the screen. So it's just awkward to try and shoot portals from that perspective. And you're also working with like, the gel and stuff from Portal 2 and everything like that. But it's pretty satisfying. It's cool to see Portal 2 at the same level, like treated with as much respect as like Lord of the Rings and Ghostbusters and stuff. Like I'm glad that video games have reached that level, I suppose. But I'm looking forward to checking out more of it. But the core question, I guess, is if you just were to look at the YouTube supercut of all the cutscenes, you'd probably get a lot of the experience and wouldn't have to spend a boatload of money on Lego Dimensions.
It's super expensive too. Like those play sets are not cheap.
Yeah, well, of course, it's Lego.
Yeah.
But then you get the satisfaction of owning a really, really cool looking thing and putting it somewhere. And it also, like, everyone loves looking at Legos around their place. I mean, I wish I had more, but the little extra step that like, oh, this could do something in a game would be maybe just enough to justify spending too much money on it all.
It makes sense. It's cool to have Portal Legos sitting on your desk, I suppose. Yeah, it's cool. Hey, Kim.
Hey, Ben.
We had a visitor in the office this week.
Yeah, CD Projekt Red came.
Yeah, who was it from CD Projekt Red? Do you remember?
Oh man, don't put me on.
Well,
the
not their
spot.
name, but their title or anything, position.
No, I can't remember what he said.
Okay, but they were showing off Witcher 3 DLC.
Yes, I had to play about 2.5 hours of the new expansion.
So this is like a full expansion.
Yeah, it will be 10 hours long total, around 10 hours, give or take. I mean, some people try to do everything. It's not like a new area, but it's expanding on previous areas, and like it's around Novigrad. So that's pretty cool. And there's all these new side quests. In addition to already having a giant game itself, they added in just as many side quests as you're used to seeing in the world. So that was exciting. But more so I just want to say to start up that it doesn't continue anything from The Witcher 3 storyline. Like that is done. Like, you go into the quest board. It's like Geralt takes another monster contract, and you
let
go.
me write this down.
You
This
go
sounds
to
novel.
well, no, you go to like slay a freaking majestic toad who is huge. It's a really intense battle. Like I seriously, I died 2 times, and I'm pretty good at that game. So
We've seen the test chamber.
I've died much more in given battles on easy mode.
yeah, it was
feel too
pretty
bad.
intense. But besides that, so he goes on this monster. He meets this weird guy. Oligard is his name. Let me try to see if I can get all these right, because there's Oligard.
I have all the right answers
his
here, so this is
brothers
a test.
Vladomir and then Odin. So
How do you spell Odin?
Odim, sorry.
Odim.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
So
The
there's
old fantasy switch one letter.
Yeah. Whew. Anyways, it kind of starts up with he just slays this monster, realizes that this guy kind of seems shady, but whatever. Geralt doesn't care. He just wants his money. And as usual, there's shades of gray to all these characters, which is what I love about the series. But he goes in, slays this toad. I don't want to go into too much, but ends up being that there was like a spell on the toad. So finds out maybe what this guy hired him to do wasn't so much because he felt like the town was in danger, but for own personal reasons, which you'll find out more as you go in. But then you kind of meet up with this guy called Odim, who, if you remember from the game in the very, very beginning of The Witcher 3, if you can remember that way back, the guy who helped you find Yennefer in the beginning, who seemed nice, but just kind of gave you the nod, like, oh, she's over there, like, go this way and you'll find her. Oh. And it was when you did the Lilac and Gooseberries quest. So.
Right.
Man,
he
sounds super peripheral.
Well, okay, seemed just like whatever in the game, and he is just really, really interesting this time around. He's like kind of sinister. You don't know what the heck. This guy always appears when you need him and helps you out, but like he wants you to do favors for him and you don't really know what you're getting into. So anyways, Geralt kind of has these two guys, Oligard and Odim, kind of pushing him towards their causes and in their directions, and the whole time you're sitting there like, I don't know if I should be helping these people, but I have to help them because of where the story quest is going. But you do make decisions between them with dialogue and stuff like that, so it's kind of like you have these two people who are pretty horrible, pushing you back and forth in their direction. And then on top of that, like, Oligard wants you to take his brother out to have the night of his life. Well, his brother's dead, so you have to find a way to get his brother. But then the brother like gets to possess Geralt's body. So this is the really cool thing. To see a different side to Geralt. The brother will possess his body, and like his stance changes, and he's like this, and it's got this like smile that comes over Geralt's face.
Weird.
He's like a little womanizer, and just like. Imagine someone like Geralt's so like straight lace and like whatever, doesn't not really the life of a party
Got
per
some
se.
great Freaky Friday stuff.
Not really, a life of the party. This guy's the life of the party, and
it's like Spanish Buzz
pretty
in Toy Story 3.
interesting.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyways, it's pretty interesting where it goes, and on top of that, a character who was really popular in the first game named Shani returns for this one. So you'll find out what Shani's been up to, and she's also kind of a romance option per se.
Kind of.
For Geralt or for
Geralt.
the weird possessed?
Well, he's
womanizer?
going after her, and maybe that makes Geralt realize maybe he does have feelings for her.
So
I
is
don't
it
know.
like I don't want to get
This
too
was
deep
only
into
2.5 hours in, so I really can't spoil
Right.
too much other than that the basic beats is like CD Projekt Red had confirmed there will be a romance with her. I asked them if it will factor into anything you did with Triss or Yennefer. They said no. So I think this is self-contained, as is the
Don't
whole
worry
story.
about being a dirty cheater, basically. Is that
Yeah,
what's happening
like
here? Okay.
don't like in Witcher 3, if you try to romance both Yennefer and Triss, you get in trouble. So you won't get in trouble here, I guess, is the point.
It's a safe zone.
The moral
I like
of the
to have to,
story.
like just relax people that are fans of the game. Like, don't worry,
Hey,
no
man.
moral guilt here.
What happens in DLC stays in DLC.
Yes,
okay?
exactly. But other than that, like it's still got the same fun. Like there are really memorable battles, like I was talking about with the toad. Not only
I can't forget it.
the tongue goes out, you got to like dodge it at the right time.
Talking about the romance options or what?
Oh,
Nice.
oh man, and use like Yarden to trap him with the magic, and then there he has clouds that come out, and you have to shoot fire at him to blow him up. There's a lot of patterns to learn with boss.
Fire. Got it.
Do you so this is the first piece of paid DLC?
Yes.
Okay, which is like, I feel like if there's ever a developer who's going to come out with some post-release DLC that just people just don't really get to be mad at them is like CD Projekt Red.
they're
there's
already-
such
but
crazy support that they give.
People were already starting like in the comments like why do I have to pay for this? I thought all their DLC was free.
It's like the longest game of like the last
Well, and
several
that's the
years.
thing. Like, it's all the cosmetic stuff is free. Any new weapons and stuff that they put in is free. But stuff that they really spend a lot of time and effort in. I mean, this is 10 hours that they're adding on to the game. The next one that comes out is going to be 30 hours, which is like almost. I think they said the second one was going to be as big as like The Witcher 2.
These just sound
whatever.
like they sound like expansions.
yeah,
like,
yeah.
more
That's
than
what
that.
they're calling them, expansions.
Yeah.
So,
I think I understand it to some extent though, because I think the message that CD Projekt Red has been pushing out there is just we're really generous. We like giving away free stuff, and so if you just kind of learn that through reading news stories on blogs or whatever, and then you hear about a big DLC thing coming, and then you hear that that's being you have to like pay for it. I understand where it's a little bit confusing for people, I guess, when the message is being switched like that.
Well, to be fair, you're getting 10 hours of content. They're charging around $10 for it. It's like $9.99 or something. So you're paying about $1 an hour if you want to.
I love breaking it down.
It's so tricky, like. And then you have something like what was Until Dawn when it came out? Was that 60s?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
a full.
it was.
It's full. People loved that up and down. Like it was short, you know what I mean? But like it had good replay value. Like it's so tricky. I hope that we don't end up veering. I hope we can try to veer away from this this trajectory we have and have been on for a while. Where it's just like, hey, this game is long, so you've gotten your money's worth. And that's something I still find myself doing with Metal Gear. I'm like, well, I think I'm done with it, but I think I got my money's worth because it's just not. like then we're just going to end up in a place where like every game is open world and takes 120 hours to beat, and that's not what I want every AAA game to be.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Well, good news that NBA 2K16 came out this week, Tim,
Why are you saying it that way?
because it's not an open world game.
Oh, that's true. Open court.
Hey, full open court. All right, you two basketball goons have been playing this hot Spike Lee joint I've been hearing so much about.
Oh gosh, the Spike Lee stuff. They did something weird for like fans who play NBA 2K. When they go into that mode, they have certain expectations, and what they did was they kind of segregated the Spike Lee story from like the actual my player, like skill building, hanging out with other players and all that.
Hanging out.
Yeah.
What does that look like?
It's story
It's
stuff,
career
right?
mode.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it's
it's
like
career mode. Oh boy.
It's like a story thing where
boy.
you take control of a player that you create.
Are you
and then-
walking them around to town?
No, you just pick to
There's
hang
been
out.
story modes.
There's like
builds-
narrative points.
It builds your relationship, gives you more fans on Twitter, kind of
Oh, that's a
improves.
thing?
Yeah,
This has been for
improves
a
your
little bit.
chemistry.
So like you go in like
know.
press like after you play a game
Yeah.
like you can go to a press conference and like the press will ask you questions, and based on how you respond, like like the coach will react in a certain way, or like people on Twitter will be like, hey, you were kind of a jerk in this, or, and like things like that. And then like before a game, a player on the other team will come up and trash talk you, and based on how you respond to that, it'll develop like a rivalry.
Does it? Sorry, my last basketball game was NBA Street, and the only basketball game you need is NBA Street. Kim would agree. But
It is-
Volume
I
1
want
or
it
Volume
back.
2?
does like the campaign mode scratch like a weird RPG itch?
Yes, that's why I love it.
does.
Really?
I love it. That's why it's my favorite. But this year they got Spike Lee to help with the story, because in the past, like they had actual NBA players kind of like hang out with you. But you know how NBA
voice
players are.
acting was
The
awful.
voice acting was awful. The present, like I said, it was hard to take.
What does that sound like? Give us an example.
We've seen EA press conferences where they have athletes up, and it's
Yeah,
just like
that's how it
boy,
was. Yeah.
Here we are.
Yeah.
Yeah, who got up there?
Yeah.
But so this year they got Spike Lee, and you play. So here's what else is weird. You always make your own, customize your player, and do your whole, build your player off that. And for the first time, it's kind of like it's your story, but for this time, like Spike Lee wrote a whole story, and you play as, you still can customize your character, but you play as Frequency Vibrations.
That's the name?
That is his name, Frequency. They call him
Or Freak for short, yeah.
Freak for short.
Ugh.
Frequency Vibrations, because he used to, kick around in his mom's tummy a lot. And you have a twin sister.
What?
Yeah.
What is the twin sister's name?
How did that come up?
It's something
How did
normal.
hey man, I heard about you and your mom's tum tum.
Yeah, you freak-
kicking around in there.
frequency
She told me about that.
vibrations.
You wouldn't stop kicking around in
You're
there.
a real freak in the sheets.
So
I
we're gonna
heard.
call you
Yeah.
Frequency Vibrations. Freak
And
for
the
short.
announcer always says freak when you score. Like you can't customize that at all.
Yeah, you used to be able to customize your nickname, but now you're just Freak. So
and it follows you
for
all the
short.
way to the NBA too. Like it's not just like in the high school games when you start out.
Frequency Vibrations.
So
This
let
is
me
stunning.
let me preface all this by saying this is an awesome sports game. It is
Yeah.
probably of all, like from all that I've played, now NHL, FIFA, now playing this.
It's pronounced FIFA.
FIFA. Okay. It is in my opinion, it is the best one out there. They really upped
Wow.
presentation this year. Gameplay feels a lot more smooth. I feel like AI is a little bit better. All the improvements that you could have.
Presentation's unbelievable.
Yeah, it is amazing, all the extra stuff they put in. And when you find stuff, like I said, the Twitter and how you interact with that, it's
Do
really
you have like
fun.
a choice of tweets that gives you some drafts of tweets and you get to choose that?
No,
Or do you
that's
just
what
choose
I
the
want them to
tone, or-
do, but they haven't really figured out a good way to, fans will comment on your past games, and like some of the players that you hang out with will like talk to you on there. So
It's not. Do they call it Twitter? Or is it like Hooter or some dumb crap like that?
I think it's just like social media feed.
yeah, but whatever. I
Hooter.
mean, it's a part of growing. And so endorsements and all that. You get all. What's cool this year is you get to pick how you spend your time. So on off days, you can do endorsements. Sorry, you can hang out with another player.
Play NBA.
Do
NBA
whatever you
2K16.
want, basically.
Play
But
Witcher
they
3
make a
DLC.
joke about that in there.
Oh, really?
But that's outside, so this doesn't happen until after you finish Spike Lee's story, and you can't bypass it. You have to do it.
Sorry, you keep chuckling every time.
It's so funny to me to think that this is the Spike Lee storyline.
It actually says NBA 2K16
Well,
featuring a Spike
and
Lee
he's in the
joint.
game, right?
Yes, he is. So he does.
Is Bill Clinton as well?
He does his documentary like style, like he's filming a documentary. So he's like behind the camera asking like this little cast he put together, like Frequency's his sister, and he's
Please,
like,
Mr.
how do you feel about
Vibration.
this?
Wait, he wrote himself into the story?
Yeah.
So it's like
He's-
adaptation? Like,
He's
Turns out
in-
Spike
he's
Lee's a
in-
maniac.
Yeah, he's
Jesus
in there.
Christ.
It's
I
not.
think I need to play an NBA game.
Yeah, it's very interesting. The storyline is not that great. The acting is the best I've ever seen it at, so that's a plus.
Good vibrations from that.
Yeah, but everything that happens is very cliche, and I'm not sure. The story sets up your second season, so your rookie year. You go play through your rookie year. You also play through high school, college. You get drafted to a college team, which is really cool. I ended up playing for Georgetown.
So you're actually playing in gameplay. You're playing high school and college games.
Yeah, you play a few,
That's
like,
that's cool.
That's
three high
really
school
cool. That's
games.
the first time they've done that. Yeah, three high school.
I think 4 college, and then like based on how you play, you get drafted into the NBA. Like I think Bert's was saying he got drafted like 5th overall based
Yeah,
on
I
how
That's-
he played.
that's
and
cool
I'm mad
to me.
about it.
Yeah, that is really cool.
See, these things are so cool, and what makes NBA stand out because they're doing different things than I feel like any other sports game. Maybe really, this mode is like really what makes me play it. I also like the GM mode, and that's also better
Yeah,
too,
it
by
is.
the way. But yeah, the big thing was Spike Lee, and he was going to make the story a lot, better. But
You're gonna care about these balls going through these
I
hoops.
was annoyed with every single character in the story because they're all just obnoxious and trying to like vie for your money and your attention, and how it ends on a different note, but I'll just feel like that.
Let me tell you how I want it to end. The story of Frequency Vibrations. You go up through high school, college, you do the whole NBA thing, and then like you're a legendary player, and President Obama invites you for a private game behind the White House, and it's just like a one-on-one with Obama, and then you just sit down and drink a beer, and then just iris close on Frequency Vibrations' face.
Frequency vibration.
That's how you
So-
want it to go. All right.
I think the
Nice.
story itself ends after the first season in the NBA.
Yeah, so what it does is what happens in the story is your narrative for your second game in the season. So at the end of that season, you'll be approached for free agency, which doesn't make any sense because it's not how rookie contracts
Freak
work.
agency.
Freak agency. So 3 people will approach you for a contract, and like you earn your VC, which helps you build up your character. So someone might offer you more VC and more minutes, and that will
the in-game
factor.
currency.
Yeah.
Viet Cong? What are we talking?
No, that's you
Vice
put
City.
money into
Virtual console.
building. You put money into building your character. So, like, if you want your shot to improve, you need VC. That's kind
that's
of like
why you
level.
see
It's
NBA
like
players shoving money into their veins.
that's how you level up. You
Okay,
gotta
I
level
get it.
your
Yeah,
guy
so-
up.
I'm way more intrigued about an NBA game than I expected to be going into this. And I always
is a
love,
lot of fun.
We don't. Ben, I'm going to speak for both of us. We
Please.
don't play a lot of sports games,
Right.
But there's always this like really weirdly refreshing, and like I'm a stranger in an alien world when I boot up a sports game. Like I'm gonna try out FIFA this year, or where's Madden at? And like something like NBA, which I never played any basketball
God,
games
you
at all.
guys have to
'Cause, like,
try it.
I know
I do
how
want to.
basketball. I know the gist of basketball, but like
Explain.
just let me
You put it in the
let me
loop.
prepare some notes. But anyway, it's just like one of those feelings where like you think that you've kind of seen it all with most games at a certain point, save for like there's some niches I'm not great at, but like jumping into like sports games or racing games is kind of like what's going on with this nitty gritty kind of sim situation, and it can be refreshing.
I agree. Kim, seriously though, gun to your head, is this game better than NBA Street?
Oh my God, it's hard.
Incorrect. It's not. There we
I
go.
would
Final
love-
verdict from
I
Kim
would love-
Wallace.
Okay, but final verdict. It's the best, one of the best, big improvement from last generation.
Okay.
I think even a big improvement from the first, because like 2 years ago when I thought they really upped the ante with this year, that's when they introduced that mode, which kind of broke it. But this year, lots of improvements. I get it. Like they said, if you're into basketball, give it a go.
Yeah,
Find out what happens to frequency vibrations.
I gotta know.
Keep building that character
Yeah.
up.
The one thing I don't like about it is that like how not interactive the Spike Lee part is.
Yeah,
and
that's
then,
what-
like because the whole thing is like, all right, you're crafting your story, and then like you don't get to do any of the actual crafting until after your
Yeah,
first year in
the
the
cool
pros.
stuff, it happens after. So just get
Like, you
through
can't
that
develop your
story.
player, you
Okay,
can't-
all right.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
I mean, it sounds cool.
Sounds all right. Hey, Brian, have you checked out City Skylines After Dark at all?
I haven't.
The new expansion.
Oh.
I know you reviewed it, but I booted up quickly on Steam just to check it out. it's like $15, and something weird that I didn't know until I booted it up. But I was checking out like the forums and Steam reviews, and it turns out they patched in like the whole night-day cycle into the baseline City Skylines, which is like the big selling point for the expansion.
Are there like new items in the like? I don't know what's in the expansion at all aside from like the night-day stuff.
Yeah. So they add like new specializations
like
for the
helicopters or
zones.
something that
They
you can
added like
fly around in?
taxis. They let passengers on the buses take like transfers, which, by the way, City Skylines, it's just a traffic simulator and like micromanager at a certain point, because that is so important in the games. This is the big deal, is that they now have taxis in this stuff.
Well, that was their original thing. The developer was, Cities in Motion.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, from Colossal Order over there. So it seems like it's not really blowing people away. And the frustrating part is I booted it up, and it only had one. I had like 3 big towns going in City Skylines, and it only has one town in there as a load option, and it was like 15 minutes into that game. And so I was looking it up, and it turns out that because of so much mod support in the base City Skylines, it's not carrying over a lot of the mods into After Dark, so it just kind of breaks your
Oh, so you
save
modded
game.
a lot? Your game?
I had like a couple like park benches and stuff that I got from Steam Workshop, and so
Those are crucial.
Then I had to like go into Steam and like set the launch parameters to be like no mod support, no blah 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 blah, and it still wouldn't load my game. So it's
Weird.
really frustrating. You couldn't carry that stuff over.
Hopefully, mods will figure that out. Modders will
I'm sure
solve
they
that
will.
problem in time.
Yeah.
So.
Tim, what have you been playing, man?
Oh, I mean, we talked Metal Gear Solid 5 into the dirt, but I think I've got to a point where I'm like, I finished it up, checked out some cool extra R&D stuff, and I'm tying a bow on that, and so that's been a good time. Loved that game, and then I actually I was trying to click over into Mad Max, and I actually played the intro hours of Mad Max, and I was excited to play it, but then it's like Metal Gear happened, and I tried to go into Mad Max, and I'm just not feeling another open world game so quickly.
That's hard to do sometimes.
Yeah, despite it's not. I'm not speaking to Mad Max's quality or anything like that, but I actually just booted up Destiny again since first going over to Taken King.
Are you starting over, or are you going back?
I just jumped straight into Taken King. And I'm really happy that I did, actually. If I start a new character at some point, I might go back to start from level 1. But I played, 5 or so hours of the Taken King content, and it's really good, really exciting. And I just finished up, the main boss fight that you can do single player and stuff.
Yeah, pretty solid little campaign.
It's
right?
a good little campaign. That last boss fight was solid.
God, I had the toughest time at the studio. There was a boss fight before the final boss fight where there's 2 of them.
Yes, that's
and
tough.
Bungie called them Bebop and Rocksteady. Those guys rocked me.
Really?
Until Reeves jumped in, and then we just plowed through them.
Sure.
And then the final boss.
They were tough, but I mean, I got to a point where I'm excited to go. I beat that boss this morning, and then I left with all the little tons of upgrades because I died so many times that I just got so much experience points and engrams and stuff, and I realized that I really like the hand cannon, and it just seems like the excitement of Taken King plus the promise of all right, I'm getting to the point where multiplayer strikes and eventually raids are around the corner.
Yeah.
And I got it. I think the season 1 version of this exotic hand cannon called the Last Word. I'm well, I can go and get the better version of it. I'm seeing the loop materialize, the gameplay loop, and I'm excited about it. And I think I'm going to try to see where this goes.
Do you play a lot of games in the morning?
More recently, yeah.
Is that a thing? Do you guys ever play before going to work? That's a rare quality in people.
No, but I stay up at all hours, so I'll play at 4 in the morning. I see him on a lot.
Tim's just
when I'm
playing
up
it.
late. Yeah,
Okay.
sorry, when I'm up late, and also if I I go into Hulu in the mornings while I get ready and watch
good-
Daria. So
It's a good strategy. Daria in the morning. You should watch your favorite show in the morning.
Yeah.
What a great way to start off your day.
I usually just watch Daria after I eat Taco Bell.
That's a good one. More recently, it's just because I don't know if you've ever lived with someone who gets up significantly earlier than you.
yeah.
It's harder to sleep in.
Yeah, and maybe like my girlfriend, she hits the snooze alarm a lot, and I just can't do this. I'm just I'll just get up. And
It's a super good
Yeah.
call.
play some
I
games.
cannot
Yeah.
stand that.
It's kind-
Stop using snooze, everybody. You're just punishing yourself again and again and
It's
again.
also really weird to start off the day with video games during the work week. I used to hear people around here doing that, that get up earlier and a bunch of old people getting up
Yeah,
at the crack of
Juba.
dawn. But it's really nice. You're really clear headed, and it's a cool way to start the day.
Let me know with Destiny, because I was debating whether I should use my old character or start new again, and I just recently downloaded Taken King and all that, so I'm looking for people to play with.
Oh, awesome. I would recommend, like, take your existing character and jump them up if you can, and, like, I think Taken King stuff is worth beelining towards, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But,
Okay.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
And there are plenty of GI editors who are still playing.
Really? Is it? I don't know if it's
so-
ever come up in the office.
I'm
I
so
haven't noticed that.
intimidated to play with like Miller or Andy, because like Miller, Andy, and Tack are doing a lot of raiding lately, and be like, "Oh, you should come join us." I'm like, you guys are gonna be like a million times better than me. This is all you do is play Destiny, especially Miller and Andy.
Miller is just a machine
Yeah.
that just roams around the office like a ghost, just
Scanning
blathering
for-
on about Destiny. The
Yeah.
Taken
He's
King.
like a Boys of Silence situation.
So it's like it would be
Like sometimes
really.
they turn around, he's right behind you,
Yes.
at my desk, screaming about some
But
gun.
that's the thing that I've noticed about most Destiny players is like they're just so excited to have like to give you all the advice in the world, and then also step up like, hey, I'll help you, get that gun
Yeah.
you want or conquer that mission or whatever. Like it's fun. It's an infectious enthusiasm for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of infectious enthusiasm, I feel like I need to channel Dan Tack and give a plug to a game that I started, haven't put that much time into, but Tim, I think you also started it. Undertale?
Yeah, I played
Is
a
it-
little bit.
Yeah. Are you still just like an hour in or so?
Yeah, I didn't get
Okay.
a chance to play much more of it, but I played about a half hour, and it's clearly riffing on classic old school RPGs. Like it reminds me
yeah.
of Earthbound a little bit.
Yeah, it looks like Mother
Yeah.
1. Like it looks
I
like
bought it
pre-Earthbound.
yesterday.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, did you start it?
No, I was downloading it and I fell asleep while I was
Perfect.
downloading. Yeah.
That sounds great. So it starts out, it's this indie RPG from this guy named Toby Fox. But it starts out and it's like, oh, this just kind of feels like a little RPG Maker thing. I guess this seems all right. I started to be won over by some really charming, well-written characters in like the first hour. Like there's some skeleton brothers that like it feels a lot like a Mario RPG.
And it's starting off deceptively simple.
Right.
But
right.
then you start to realize that might be the point early on, is how simple it's being. It's very much, it seems like it's angling itself as a commentary on old school RPGs and stuff.
Yes.
Oh my God, this sounds awesome.
But
Yeah.
it gets to a point, like I was reading the Steam reviews. Very few games on Steam have the overwhelmingly positive Steam reviews, but the reviews were so over the top glowing. Everyone was losing their mind over this thing. And Dan Tack just finished it last night, and he's like, yep, absolutely amazing. He is super, super excited about it.
Yeah.
And so it's an interesting premise. So like the developer, in like the little interviews I've seen with him online, because he hasn't talked much about it, but he was just talking about how frustrated he is with RPGs, dealing with characters and enemies and how they're all essentially the same. Like you can have hundreds of different monsters as an RPG, but really it just means, in his words, like you attack, you heal for a bit, you attack, you kill them, you move on. And so the whole premise of this game is that there's a bunch of different ways to interact with all the enemies you encounter, and they all have weird personalities. Like you'll face a guy and you can do the basic attack, and it kind of has a Mario RPG timing-based system. It's a little more complicated than that. But also, this enemy that you're fighting will just crack jokes. And as he's cracking jokes, you can choose to mock him or to laugh at him or to joke back at him. And it's like make a bunch of ice-related puns because he's like an ice monster.
Sure.
And so like all these different enemies have different ways that you can interact with them, and they're talking to you throughout the battle. And so it has a bunch of endings. And so Dan was saying that after he beat it, he wants to restart it immediately to try a different strategy as far as how to treat the enemies in the game and how you interact with the world.
You know, when you say it's a nod to like RPGs, you have like a 30-hour investment in your mind. Is it built for replayability? Is it trying to be, is it shorter?
It's shorter. He said, God, around maybe like 10 hours, something like that.
That sounds about right.
But that it is very, very, very replayable.
Okay.
Replayable. And he said that the ending is brilliant, brilliant, brilliant.
All right, seems like almost
Wow.
like, reminds me of Until Dawn a little bit,
Yeah.
like in a weird, different way where it's like, hey, this is a reasonable length for a game, and you're going to want to replay to see what else happens.
Yeah, so that's Undertale on Steam. It's
Okay.
it's cheap. You should check it out if you like
$9.99.
that. There we go. Done
Cool.
deal. Cool. Anything else you guys want to cover?
Should we do some emails?
Yeah, let's get the emails.
Do it.
Welcome back to the Game Informer Show podcast. So we got a selection of awesome emails this week. If you want to hear us talk about anything or you have any questions for us, you can email podcast@gameinformer.com. We always choose one email every week as email of the week. We don't know what it is going into this conversation. It's usually whatever is cool hypothetical or interesting question. So yeah, it's podcast@gameinformer.com. But we're going to pick up with one that we wanted to get to last week, but didn't have time for it. This is from Jacob. He is from Vancouver. So he starts off, love the et cetera, which is just, I think, insert praise here.
Right.
So Jacob says, I was playing Arkham Knight when it came out a few months ago and was fairly impressed with the narrative from the get-go, especially how the opening moments really toyed with video game styles of storytelling. When I was at the end of the game, I actually saw how incredible Rocksteady's use of the medium was when I realized that they were telling a tale that could not have been told in the same way in any other form of entertainment. They utilize video games interactivity as a medium to the fullest extent that I've seen in many years, whereas I feel too often other games simply tell us a story that could fairly easily be adapted into other long-form serials such as television or comics. My question is, what games do you feel truly utilize video games as a whole form of expression to truly weave a narrative or experience that would be impossible elsewhere? Examples that Jacob gives. For me, besides Arkham, would be Psycho Mantis and changing TV input to Hideo 1 or Fission Mailed in MGS2.
But those are like little novelties, you know?
And of course, pretty much all of Eternal Darkness, even though it didn't strictly tie into the story per se. That's Jacob. Yeah, I mean, some of those instances were so impactful, though, because they were sparingly used. Like, fourth wall breaking didn't happen constantly, which made them surprises. But did anything come to mind for you guys?
Oh, he brings up, like, you know, that video games can often, the story in video games can be told in something else. And I always just wonder how much of that comes down to the writers of video games. Like, they're movie fans. They really want to write a movie or a comic book, and they're just going to shoehorn the story into this video game no matter what.
Yeah.
The one that immediately comes to mind, like, 'cause obviously there's like the Shadow of the Colossus example, which is like my love in life, my one true love. But something that it's from a game that came out a couple of years ago, and the more I think about it, and the more time is between the release and, you know, today, the more I really, really appreciate it, is the ending of Brothers.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
It is maybe the best example of that I can think of. It might be like my favorite moment of highlighting the storytelling power through interactivity. And I'm not going to spoil it.
Yeah.
Definitely play that game. It's just for the ending alone. The rest of the game is fine. There's some interesting stuff in there, but the ending of the game is so brilliant.
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, Mass Effect is one that comes to mind, where, you know, the whole story is interactive to an extent. Also, things like Telltale has, you know, you're basically controlling a lot of aspects of the story. I remember Assassin's Creed, the very first one, had some cool things where you could, like, hit a button at certain moments and it would, like, change the perspective of, like, whether you're seeing it from, like, you know, Altair's perspective, or like it would almost like you were the director of that scene, which is kind of cool.
Wait, what? And they never used that again in the series?
No, it was only in the first one. Like, if you were like walking and, like, you know, whatever, what was that guy's name? Musalid, I think his name was.
I'm not sure.
He was, whenever he was talking, like, Altair would be walking around, like, they'd be having this conversation, and like like an artifact would appear, and you'd hit like A or something, and it would like shift the camera to like another part of the room, and it was kind of just a cool interactive way to show that scene. I had another one, Witcher 3. I don't know if they would ever be able to tell that story.
Sure.
I mean, they have it in the books, but
yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like you're big on like the choose your own adventure stuff.
I love that stuff.
Okay, but I mean, that's a book format, man. Games are just adapting.
Yeah, it really took off, man. Choose your own format. You can't walk it down an aisle of Barnes & Noble without finding, you know, the next, Stephen King, choose your own adventure.
It depends how
Classic Kurt Vonnegut ones.
You define interactivity. Like, one thing that games can do better than movies, anything else, is I really feel like worlds, because you can interact with the world in a way that you can't while just observing in a movie, but even reading a book or whatever. So in my opinion, the way that open worlds have just kind of grown really over the last few years in particular have been amazing, and how everything's going open world. But to also say that, I feel like interactivity also includes when it gets you involved in the narrative somehow. And I think a good recent example of that is Until Dawn. And I think that game is what it is because you have that investment of you are making choices that potentially lead you down one path or another. And it makes it feel like it's a cool experience that you're a part of, that like you're never really dictating where a story goes in a movie or book. So.
That core story of Until Dawn could have absolutely been told in a movie. I mean, it was paying homage to tons of horror movies, but like that would have been one through line. You know, they don't have the time or the space or the budget in most cases to create all the different possible little paths that you go down.
And I don't think it would be as fun as a movie.
Yeah,
like
no,
what they did with that made that game what it was just having that like, oh man, I could do this and a character could just die because of that, or I could try to keep these people alive. And I like that. So I
think mine is also a more recent example. Her story came to mind because it's a story that you can so you can watch that interview from beginning to end of the lady talking about this story,
which you did on YouTube
after I beat the game.
Right.
I got the ending and I got my own conclusions drawn from it, and that would have been really boring actually. But the way that the game was structured, that you are essentially, trying to I can't give away who you are playing in it, but it feels like, you're an FBI agent or just someone trying to figure out some cold case. And it's the way you're interacting with these snippets of history. And if it wasn't about me interacting with this interface and that was purely it, like if they told it any different way, it could have been done in a different medium. But the fact that I'm just sitting there trying to punch in keywords and that's half of the experience has made me realize that I don't think I've done anything like this, and I don't think you could do this in anything besides video games.
And I kind of got that feel from Shenmue as well. I think that might be why I loved it so much back when it released on the Dreamcast, is that, you're controlling Ryu and you're walking around and trying to solve this murder, and like you have no idea where you're looking, so you're going around talking to people, finding out where sailors hang out and
yes, of
things.
Course.
So I mean, it's kind of cool that you throw yourself into that mystery and that story, and just trying to see it through now. Hopefully with Shenmue 3.
What's your favorite movie where they try and find out where sailors hang out?
I got nothing.
Okay.
So that was a good question, Jacob. Thanks. The next one's from Gary. Hello, lady and gents. A big part of my multiplayer history revolves...
Hang on, did they know that Kim was going to be here?
This is what the email said.
Wow. All right.
I appreciate a lot of our readers when they write in do say, hi, if Kim's there or whatever.
It's great.
When they do it. It's nice. I like it.
It makes us feel guilty when you're not here.
We love having you.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, it's like, oh, they remembered I exist.
That's nice.
Kim, you're existing right now.
I know.
There is proof. A big part of my multiplayer history revolved around playing 007 Nightfire in high school. It was hilarious and fun, and all the zany modes you could turn on. It also didn't play too bad on GameCube either. Do you all feel there are some multiplayer games that are constantly glossed over and may just die, in the past? Love the new format for the podcast, Gary. So it's just obviously underappreciated multiplayer or multiplayer modes, I think, is kind of the idea here.
Yeah, when I first was thinking of Assassin's Creed's multiplayer when you're talking about this, because I feel like everybody goes in to play that game for the story, and like multiplayer is just like there, but it actually is pretty fun from what I played. But
it is.
Then when you read more of the question, I thought maybe he wanted like actual games that were just multiplayer didn't. So I don't know if I've got a good one for that.
I'm trying to remember. Is Nightfire the one we played for the Super Replay Showdown? I think it was. Where it's like Phil versus Reiner, and you turn off all the gravity, and they have the grappling hooks.
Oh, that might be. Yeah, I think so.
Because I love playing that too, and I'm pretty sure that was Nightfire. I get confused. My obvious example, Tim already knows, is
it's Driver San Francisco.
Driver San Francisco split screen tag mode is some of the most fun, like local multiplayer I've had in years and years. Where it is Driver San Francisco, where the premise is that the character's in a coma and he can teleport and like warp between cars and kind of zoom out to like an RTS perspective.
Oh, I forgot about that.
And so two characters can do that, and it's just a game of tag, split screen, 1-on-1, and you're just jumping around to different cars. But it gets crazy because you're in a car and you're trying to run away from everybody else or from the other person, and then the other person can warp into any car around you. So imagine playing a racing game where at any second a car next to you, like a lightning bolt, will hit it and it'll just swerve towards you wildly. It's basically the ghosts from the second Matrix movie, but very fun.
That's great. I love that mode, and people should absolutely check it out. If you stumble upon a copy of Driver San Francisco and you're looking for like a good, fun, like local co-op or competitive game, like super
I'm sure
good.
it's probably so cheap now too. It's a slam dunk.
Yeah. I feel like for me, like I guess it is now generations old, but like I thought about like Resident Evil Outbreak again, and just like how amazing of a multiplayer experience that was, and no one ever talks about it. It feels completely forgotten, and man, I think there's more room for the classic. Hopefully that the Resident Evil remake and Resident Evil 0, and if they do the Resident Evil 2 remake in a way that's similar to, you know, the other 2 GameCube games I mentioned, maybe that means there would be room for a multiplayer Resident Evil game that's in the classic formula that could harken back to the 4-player stuff of Outbreak. That would be awesome.
Well, you can just cross your fingers that Umbrella Corps is a huge success and that they keep iterating on that and eventually shoehorn in some Outbreak stuff into that.
Nope. I would just. I mean, I haven't played any Umbrella Corps, but like, but I don't want it to be a first-person game. I have a very specific thing in my mind of. I just want like an updated Outbreak, basically. Yeah.
I guess for me, I don't know if this is really an underappreciated multiplayer mode, but Star Fox 64, I love the crap out of that. I mean, most people just think of Star Fox 64, they think of like, you know, the on rails, you know, single player mode. But I think that multiplayer mode, which didn't even really, I mean, it made the jump to the 3DS version, but you couldn't play over Wi-Fi. You had to play like locally with people.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, like you couldn't play online. It was really weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that like my friends and I in like middle school would have like sleepovers just dedicated to playing Star Fox 64 and GoldenEye's multiplayer, and it was so much fun. And
God, we should do a whole episode about the N64.
We should.
How much we love that.
That was a good episode.
I like that one.
You should check that out if you're looking.
More recent example, I guess, Mass Effect 3's multiplayer.
Oh no,
I think was
That's not underappreciated.
You don't
Yeah,
think?
Kim
I
has
think,
gushed about that in
I
the
think a
first
lot of people were like really down on it. And
Ain't
didn't
nobody
even give
talking
it
about
No, I
Dragon
think-
Age
They didn't even give it a chance.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, did you ever get into Dragon Age?
I didn't even touch it because I was so in that game world forever that I think worked with Mass Effect because it wasn't as long. And when you're finished with it, you still kind of wanted something to do with the game. And honestly, I feel like the multiplayer, well, when it first announced, was not received well. When people actually played it, they're like, this is really fun. I spent so many nights up to like 4 a.m. just playing on the multiplayer with my friends. So,
all right. Well, those are good answers, guys.
Hey, good answers. Good answers.
This one's from Jake from Minnesota. Hello, friends. I very much enjoyed listening to your podcast. I was wondering what your first platinum trophy or 100% achievement game was. Jake says his was Bloodborne, but it would have been Resident Evil 4 if there had been trophies back in the GameCube days. Keep up the good work, Jake.
I don't pay attention to trophies or or achievements. I stopped because when I first got the system, I was like, oh, this is really fun. And then I was playing games for the wrong reasons. So I know I don't have many on PS3 because on the PlayStation because I wasn't playing as much with that. I think I have like Walking Dead or whatever, which was an easy one to get, but
100%ing Walking Dead.
I know, like, 360 though, I know I had a couple and I tried to like sign on to my account before I walked to check like a while ago, but I just I can't remember what it was.
Yeah.
Because I haven't cared about them in so long, especially when the Xbox One came along. I don't know what it did, but it made me even less interested in getting achievements.
Yeah.
This might be the wrong crew because I also have never checked that stuff.
I think I'm in the same boat with you guys generally. I didn't. I always thought like achievements are cool, but I'm never gonna go after it unless I think that there's an interesting gameplay thing going on there.
Or unless you're like missing just one and you've gotten like everything naturally and you're like, well, I should just really do this one thing.
For the sake of it. I think the first one I can remember was Resident Evil 5, just because I was playing that game so much anyway, and like I loved any extra excuse just to get in there and like play that game co-op again. I thought Resident Evil 5 I think is like one of the best co-op games ever been made. I just loved all right, let's go through this again and let's look for these medallions and like let's fully upgrade all of our guns and then see what that's like. I remember then they expanded with some of their DLC, like the Lost in Nightmares and was it like Desperate Escape or something, and those expanded the achievement count. So I don't know if you can say I technically have 100% anymore. I got really close. I got all the single player like achievements in BioShock 2. I loved BioShock 2.
Yeah, that's right.
Like, that gameplay is so good. But then there'd be that thing where like, oh, hey, there's multiplayer only achievements too. And boy, was that multiplayer in BioShock 2 no good.
that's actually an underrated multiplayer mode answer.
Oh, is that it?
Bioshock
Okay.
2 multiplayer.
Bioshock 2. Yeah. Brian, you have one?
I don't get a whole lot of like 100% achievements or platinum trophies, but I remember the first one I ever got was Fight Night Round 3.
Of course.
But that's because I think there were 5 achievements for a total of 200 points each.
Oh.
Because that was like the very early days of the achievement system.
Like, we need to do this, I guess.
So I think they just like EA threw together like 5 achievements. It's like one's like complete career mode, one is like get the heavyweight or whatever class you're in championship belt, one's play 1 match online, one is like play 10 matches online, and so it was pretty easy.
I think if achievements and trophies had come when I was like in middle school, elementary school age, I think I probably would have had a lot. But I think as I got I'm saying as I got older, it became harder and harder to keep up with games, and I was buying way more games as well. So when I was playing something, I just like I could sit here and try to get all these achievements and trophies, or I could move on to the next thing and have more experiences. So I always just did that. But I often think about that. It's like, gosh, because I played the heck out of like the same games over and over when I was a kid, and if I had an excuse to get in like a trophy or achievement, I would probably definitely done that.
What
more.
games growing up do you think you would have a platinum trophy?
I probably would have done for sure Secret of Mana, Earthbound.
Hypothetical platinums.
Yeah.
The new segment with Kim Wallace.
Yes. Final Fantasy 6.
NBA Street.
Oh, yeah, Final Fantasy. I would say 10 the first time I played it. Like when I got the collection now, it was the remaster rather. I was like, I've done all these legendary weapons when I was a kid. I'm not going through that again. But, I did that back. And I think of all the crazy things I did with side quests and games. Because when I bought an RPG, I'm like, I'm doing everything. I spent the money on this. I have to do.
Bad Wallace.
I would get like the strategy guides and follow. So I made sure I didn't miss anything. That's not how I play games anymore, though. But when I was like that, definitely probably would have had a really, really high gamer score.
I think I'd probably have 4, which would be Mario World, Sonic 3 and Knuckles, Ocarina of Time.
You're just
Final
listing
Fantasy
your
10.
favorite games.
But I played the crap
I'm
out of
just
them.
listing games I've played more than one.
I know, but guys, tell us your hypothetical gamer score. We need that hypothetical number.
The good addition, good side question. That made me think of like recently. I was like, okay, I beat Metal Gear's main story. I'm halfway through all the side ops. Well, what's the end game here? Let's look at the trophies. And I'm like, I'm not doing all these. Come on.
Yeah, that's what I do a lot.
It's good to get, like, if you want to keep playing a game, you don't know exactly why, go into those trophies and achievements just being like, what's the real end result here? What's the end game, the final, goalpost? And you might just be like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
Next question comes from Renee. Hi, everyone. I was wondering which game has impressed you the most by a developer that you normally weren't impressed by. For Renee, they say it's Insomniac Games. I was never really impressed by the Resistance franchise. No mention of Ratchet and Clank, so that might not be like complete knowledge, or maybe they didn't like Ratchet and Clank.
Big Disruptor fan.
Yeah. Then Sunset Overdrive released, and wow, I was completely blown away. It's one of those games that reminds me of why I play games to begin with, Renee. And, obviously, Sunset Overdrive was sort of a return to form for after Fuse and some mixed reviews on Resistance and stuff. There was a kind of a return for Insomniac.
I know for me, what was a big surprise was how well The Walking Dead was from Telltale, because before The Walking, before that, it was just like, these games are okay. Like, there's never anything. I play them because I like adventure games, but when they got The Walking Dead, I don't think anybody expected The Walking Dead to blow up from them. Like, the way that it didn't, to be that good and really be the game everybody was talking about that year.
And their track record with other licenses as well.
Right off
really,
the heels of Back to the Future and Jurassic Park. Back to the Future was fine, but Jurassic Park was such a disaster.
Park was rough.
That's like, I think, one of the best answers I could have imagined to this specific question.
It's tough. Like, the impressed thing, it doesn't fully apply, because it's not that I wasn't impressed with this developer, but just nothing they made got its hook specifically in me. And this is not just kissing Jake Solomon's ass, but it's Firaxis with XCOM, Enemy Unknown. Like, I'm not a big turn-based strategy guy. And I tried Civs before in the past and just never quite clicked with me. And then Enemy Unknown just rocked my world, and I fell in love with it. So
yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah, I was just not very aware of like Square Enix prior to Final Fantasy X. Like I was not a big RPG guy growing up.
Because they were called Squaresoft, that's why.
Oh yeah, that's it. But yeah, like Square games. So Final Fantasy X like sucked me in, and I was like, I played it like.
So you had tried the other Final Fantasies and didn't like them?
No, I just I wasn't very aware of it. But then once Final Fantasy X hit, like I was aware of their existence, but I never really felt compelled to play it. And then I went over to a friend's house and he had Final Fantasy X, and I was like, I've got to buy this on PS2. And so I did that, and ever since then, I've at least tried every offline Final Fantasy. I've never tried the MMOs.
Okay, well, good. I mean, Square really hit its stride in 2001. I feel like, so you're not missing much.
I've gone back and tried the older ones.
For one of those turning points for me where I really loved Spyro. So like I was like an Insomniac fan from like before I knew what Insomniac was. I loved Spyro, and I think the reason like I played a lot of Spyro and then I tried out Crash, and I think somewhere that the Crash series has never been for me, and I never really enjoyed that. But then I got around to Jak and Daxter, and like that turned me around on Naughty Dog for sure. And then like from there on in, I mean, save for like Uncharted 1, which like I got through that game because I heard it was surprising and really ambitious, and then like the kind of like I came back around on them again with Uncharted 2, and then obviously now we are where we are with that developer. So I think, Jak and Daxter got Naughty Dog on
Someday I'll woo you over to the Crash side, Tim.
I'm playing some Warped right now. Like I'm playing it on and off.
Warped is a fun novelty, but I want you to play through Crash 1 and Crash 2 with me.
I've tried. I have it on my I had it on my PSP and my Vita and stuff like that, and was trying to check through. That game's hard.
No, I want to play on the Xperia Play phone.
Okay.
So
perfect.
I think one other that might apply for me is Rare with Donkey Kong Country. Like I liked like the RC games on NES, but they never really blew me away. But Donkey Kong Country like really pushed them over the edge.
You weren't a huge Battletoads fan going into.
No, I wasn't like I mean, I played it with like a friend in elementary school, but I wasn't like obsessed with it like I was with Donkey Kong.
What is that face, Ben?
What are you talking about? It's an audio podcast. Keep going.
Oh, okay, gotcha. So Ben and Tim, and then I'm going to add in crew here. I've been listening to the GI Show for 5 years. Every week since then, it's been my go-to podcast. Thank you very much. This is from Marty. And then this goes into... Anyway, I just want to say thanks, especially after the interview with Greg Miller from Kind of Funny Games. I've always been a fan of his, though my exposure to him wasn't through IGN, but through some things he did with Rooster Teeth. After that, I followed him on Twitter, watched Up at Noon, yada, yada, started following Greg Miller. Here's Marty's question. Are there any game industry personalities that you follow on a regular basis? My time online is split pretty evenly between Game Informer. Shout out to our Dan Tack and I's Dark Souls playthrough. Thanks, Marty. But that is the question. So basically looking for like some recommendations, people that you like to follow that are in the industry, personalities and stuff like
Writing
that.
or like
video? I think you can go across the board.
Across the entire thing.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'll start out. I always liked it. I saw some people commenting like, "Oh, it's so cool when."
Also, first off, never go to anything before Game Informer ever.
Right.
Game Informer is your home.
Right.
We are giving you these suggestions in confidence that you'll always come back home to us.
Please.
Yes.
Yeah. But I saw some comments on like the Greg Miller interview that are like, "Oh, I love it when outlets refer to other outlets or like when people cross the streams like that." And I did too. Like before I got into this industry, I always loved seeing that kind of collaboration and whatnot. But I'm a big fan of Games Press, mainly podcasts, believe it or not. So a lot of mine are more podcast related. And this isn't necessarily the press side of things, but I think Idle Thumbs, the podcast, they continue to just knock it out of the park. Like
I like Idle
Jake
Thumbs.
Rodkin, Sean Vanneman, Chris Remo over there, and the others. Like they are so articulate and they do such a great job.
And even their non-gaming podcast, they have a Twin Peaks rewatch, which I've been having as a companion for my like run through the Twin Peaks again. And then their like count up to the last season of Mad Men was
so
great.
good.
They're so smart and entertaining. It's like honestly like some perfect podcast people there.
Yeah, it's like 4 Kim Wallaces over there.
Yeah.
Anyways, and then also just rounding out the podcast front, obviously Giant Bomb. I'm a big Bombcast fan, going way back and whatnot, and it's weird having Dan on that now, invading one of my favorite podcasts. And then also shout out to the Beastcast, which is Giant Bomb's East Coast podcast, because like Vinny and their new hire Austin Walker are just kicking ass. It is amazing how natural they all sound, and they're so good, especially Austin, at pontificating. And I'm so jealous of that skill to just wax poetic for a while. I think Miller is really great at it at GI, but the Beastcast, it's just knocking it out of the park. I'm really happy with that.
For sure.
And then real quickly, 8-4 out of Japan, which is like some former 1UP people and whatnot. Tim and I just guested on an episode. We didn't mention it.
Yeah, they're wonderful folks. Always super welcoming, and they are not on the press side. They are a localization team over there. And they run a great show, and they're really full disclosure. Like, hey, we're talking about this game, this series. We've worked on this game. We're going to talk about this one. Don't believe anything we say if they're going to start talking about games they like and stuff like that. But great insight into the Japanese side of just being a part of the industry, and then also just fans of games.
Yeah, for sure. And then I'll just keep going all day. On the writing side, I really like Matt Leone over at Polygon.
Yes, I was going to bring him up. He's a great feature writer.
For sure.
He just finds such interesting stories to tell that I always read what he puts out.
Yeah, and then for long form stuff, Jason Schreier, Kotaku, I really like reading. But anyways, that's it for me.
Well, Ben, you, I think, systematically went through every single one of mine. So
all right,
we have similar tastes. Great.
Well, Patrick Klepek now at Kotaku.
Klepek's great.
I like reading his stuff a lot. He's got a lot of journalistic knowledge too that he infuses into the articles, and he also just how he feels about something when you read it. He's really great.
Knows his horror games too.
Yes, exactly.
Really appreciate that.
I mean, I'll throw it like this is an old school one, but I'm gonna throw one out to Francesca Reyes.
Oh yeah.
Who was previously editor-in-chief of Official Xbox Magazine. I grew up reading her stuff, and she was really influential in like just knowing that there is a woman out there who is doing this, and she always did an awesome job. So she also was really like influential in like giving me advice on my career, and I really like what she does, and I like her. She's got just a good attitude about everything, which I think is hard to always find in the gaming industry.
For sure.
Yeah, and I mean, she was very helpful with me as well. She was my very first freelance editor that I ever had, and yeah, she's fantastic.
I'm trying to think. There was one other person I wanted to
I did think of someone.
You did? Good.
I did. I think you mentioned Polygon, the McElroys, Justin and Griffin, and their monster, specifically their Monster Factory episode where they take just character creators and make the most horrific characters.
I've never seen
one of my
this.
favorites is they went through Skyrim and they made is that Khajiit? Are they the cat ones?
Yeah.
And tried to make like as close to Garfield as possible and play it as Garfield, and then like the eyes were all wrong, so it looked like a cyborg Garfield. So of course, being the comic geniuses they are, they made just Garfield into an acronym, so it's just like a cyborg Garfield, and then they basically role play a bunch of Skyrim with some mods and stuff like that as Garfield Khajiit. They're hilarious.
That sounds great.
I would throw into the ring Max and Brian over at IGN, Max Scoville and Brian Altano. And I mean, the rest of IGN is great. I did write for them, though, full disclosure, for about a year. I really like a lot of people over there. Same thing with Kotaku. There's also a site called LaserTimePodcast.com.
Chris Antista and
a bunch of former
Henry
Games
Gilbert.
Press people. Yeah, Henry Gilbert. I believe Dave Rudden, who...
That's a great point. Yeah, they also put on VG Empire, which is their video game music podcast. And full disclosure, I've guested on a few episodes of that, and then also on the Laser Time podcast, and a bunch of great guys, super funny dudes.
Yeah, they have some really hilarious articles. Like they ranked all of the characters in Bloodsport, like even like down to like the crappy fighters that were on screen for 2 seconds.
I love Bloodsport.
That's awesome.
So
How did the Monkey Man do? The guy on all fours.
I think he was like near the top, actually.
All right, good. Correct.
But yeah, super entertaining articles. And they ranked like all the Rocky movies by like action scenes.
Okay. I like it.
Or something like that. Something really crazy like that.
How much more time do we got?
Maybe a quick one. We're definitely getting up there.
Okay. So this next question is super long, but I can boil it. I can boil it all down. I'm going to boil it down because the question is actually just a paragraph. Like it's this whole page, but then just that's the question.
Holy God.
So this one's from Sean from North Carolina. Basically, talking about Arkham Knight and stories in games and qualifying like, hey, Arkham Knight did their story really well. It's very straightforward, not needlessly complex, and then goes into how Assassin's Creed sometimes Unity is like too complex. The boiled down gist of this is: so are confusing or hard to follow game stories something any of you have experienced? I can say
Kingdom
yes.
Hearts.
And if so, how do you approach such games inside and outside of work? Do you passively ignore what may seem like an impenetrable chaos, or stop to make sense of it? And does it make the experience harder to appreciate when you're not even sure why you're performing certain actions? Thanks, Sean.
It's such a big difference between games with complicated stories versus games, because it's a long-running series that have complicated stories that you're kind of jumping into a little bit later.
Yeah, and that's why Assassin's Creed, if you jump in later, it's just kind of like, well, I'll try to glean the impetus of this main little story, but the overarching stuff, I don't know.
Yeah, I have no idea. I mean, Metal Gear is the obvious example of that, and like, I don't know. Every once in a while, I pull up a wiki of like, all right, where did Metal Gear 2 take place? Where's Zenzibar? Okay, that's in Asia. That's right. Just trying to remember little stuff like that that I'll have to pull up, but...
I honestly think that's why I haven't gotten into the Metal Gear series. It just seems so complex, and this storyline's been running. And no matter how many times I read like a beginner's guide or any, I still am like, how can I remember all of this?
If you haven't been playing them and like replaying them because they're fun since the PlayStation era, I don't blame anyone for being like, I don't know how to approach this thing.
I'm playing Metal Gear Solid 5 Phantom Pain. It's my first Metal Gear game aside from Ground Zeroes, and I'm just choosing to make it so that like I'm just going to experience this as a self-contained story.
And I wouldn't want to say don't play Metal Gear Solid 5 if you're interested in that gameplay, because 5 is relatively light on the story. You're not going to be that confused, and if you are, we're also confused as big fans. It's not a matter of like, oh, we know exactly why that character's acting that way.
Yeah, I think the most recent example for me was just like, as of this morning, I mentioned I played through that main story mission of The Taken King of Destiny. And, the core Destiny game, I don't know what's going on in there. People are like talking about motes of light and capturing Crota's spirit in a crystal and stuff. And it's just so heavy-handed fantasy jargon. And what I love now is like, I feel like Cade Six, Nathan Fillion's character, is like in on how heavy-handed this is, and now I get to be like zone out and catch a few key words, and then Nathan Fillion comes in and quips and being like, okay, so we gotta go, burst in on his funeral. Sure, got it. Why didn't you just say that? And I feel like I'm almost being rewarded for glazing over the story, which is really clever. But yeah, other than that, like I don't know why I'm doing anything in that game besides it's fun to shoot things and I want better loot. So that's how I deal with it, is just I do ignore it, and I'll maybe ask a friend or on Twitter, be like, so what's going on here? Get a summary later on,
just keep plowing ahead. More often than not, when I'm confused by a story in a game or by all these different little factors, plow ahead within an hour. I'm like, okay, now I really care about that.
Yeah. But those are the questions. Those are our emails. If you have an email for us, it's podcast@GameInformer.com. We are going to give email of the week to Jacob, and he was the one that wrote in about just asking us games that wouldn't be the same outside of the medium of video games.
Oh, sure.
Like stories.
Yeah, that's a good question.
So we'll send you a little thank you in the mail, follow up with that. But otherwise, stay tuned for our interview with Jake Solomon from Firaxis, touch on his career and some XCOM 2 in there, and he is a super entertaining dude.
Yeah, enjoy the interview.
Yeah, thanks for watching.
Jake Solomon, thank you so much for joining us on the Game Informer Show, man.
Thank you very much. I'm thrilled to be here.
Tim and I are big fans of XCOM.
Absolutely.
It was a real thrill to go to the studio for the cover story trip back during the original Enemy Unknown launch. I don't know if you remember that, years and years ago.
I do remember it. I remember it like it was just years and years ago. It's a hazy time in my memory, but yes, I do remember. That was that's truly one of my favorite development memories. I was so here I am sidetracking things already, but we did so much work for that visit from you guys. It was a very stressful time. So it's one of those times where after it happens, you look back and you're like, oh, what a great memory. That was a big moment. That was a lot of fun.
Oh, good. You guys were brilliant though, because for the demo you showed us for the cover story on Enemy Unknown, you guys put us in as characters in the game and then gave everybody customized nicknames.
You were B-roll, right, Ben?
Yeah, they call me B-roll. It was brilliant, but like my self-esteem is so low. I think I saw my name first, and I thought like, well, surely this is a coincidence. There's a Ben Hanson in XCOM. All right, moving on. But then like the amazing part,
Ben Reeves was cornbread, right?
Because they Googled Ben Reeves Game Informer nickname, and there was an old article with a quote from The Office where he said that he wanted his nickname to be cornbread.
A self-appointed nickname, the worst kind.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. That's our producer Garth. He has Game Informers around his office, so he's a total fanboy. And yeah, he went deep cover. He like went underground to find out what these nicknames should be. I was pretty impressed myself.
It really worked wonders. And then of course we all died, and it was a great demo.
Of course you did.
We're all very impressed.
Yep, naturally.
So, I mean, we haven't really talked to you much since the launch of that first game. So can you just walk us through what that launch was like for you? What the feedback was like?
Oh man, those were dark times. No, it was great actually. It was, that was neat. You guys were the first ones to see the game. You guys saw it. You guys saw it before anybody even knew that XCOM as a strategy game even existed. I remember when I was talking to you guys that first time, I kept like tripping over my own words because it had been so secret for like years that by the time I talked to you, I was like, oh my God, I shouldn't be saying these things. But yeah, it was great. And like the release, it was a long development cycle. And when you make something like that, I think there was always a question of, you're always wondering, I think as a designer, you're always wondering, is this thing any good? And then you're like, well, okay, people say they like it, but is there an audience for this? And then, we were blessed to, when the game came out, that there was an audience and it was received really well. And I don't know, it was all those, I guess all the years of work, they definitely felt worth it at that point. So then, it's kind of like, so I've got 2 kids,
sure.
Right? I got 2 kids, and I'm having a 3rd kid actually in January.
Congratulations!
Yeah, congrats.
Yeah. And so, thank you. And what happens is that you have a kid, and in the first 6 months, it's very hard. You're not getting a lot of sleep and all this stuff. But then by the time it's like 2 years old, 3 years old, your child, you're like, yes. You look back on everything with rose gold. You're like, let's do it again. And so I think it's kind of what happened. I think the release was so much fun that we were like, you know what, that was a piece of cake. Let's do it again. So I guess here we are.
So were you fully prepared to go into an XCOM 2, or was there kind of some downtime where you could think about what you wanted your next project to be?
I had some downtime because after Enemy Unknown, then we did Enemy Within, and that was an expansion pack. And for Axis, we always do these expansion packs to our main titles. And so I wasn't as involved in the expansion pack, which kind of gave me time to sort of, sit there and think about things. But for me, it was never any question really. Like I always wanted to, I don't know. I think that as a designer, you do something and then all you see are the things that could be better. And so, immediately after we finished Enemy Unknown, I was thinking about XCOM 2. I mean, right away I was thinking, okay, what are the things we can do, to make XCOM better? So it's downtime, but I think a lot of designers, downtime simply means like now you're thinking about game design at home. So, that's pathetic. That sounds pathetic, but it's true. I mean, I don't ever stop. And why would you? It's such a wonderful job, and I'm so blessed that if I didn't have this job, it would be my hobby. And so I don't go home and just not start thinking about design. And it's a very easy job to take home with you because a lot of it's in your head. And so I think that's just kind of how it works. You never stop thinking, and you're always thinking about the next thing. So that's kind of how it was after Enemy Unknown.
It sounds like, from talking to more and more designers, it seems like that is just sort of the thing. If you want to have good ideas, there's no way to turn off that faucet. And we visited From Software and talked with Hidetaka Miyazaki, the president and lead designer on all the Dark Souls games, who I bring up not only because he also can't turn it off and seems like he's a crazy workaholic, but he's a huge Civilization fan as well, which he was talking about. But he talked about the same deal. You just bring it home with you.
Yeah, I think that, and it's one of those things where I think the things that make you, if you find success at design, I think a lot of times that the things that make you good at that are also the things that make the job. I guess it's hard to sit here and say game design's a hard job, but it has its moments. And I think the things that make it hard are the things that maybe help you as a designer. The fact that if you're a person, you sit there, you look at the things you make, and I think that a lot of designers I know, you're the first one to look at it and be like, that's terrible. Like, people can't convince you otherwise. You're like, this thing is terrible, and my family is going to be ashamed when this thing ever sees the light of day. And you're always operating in a fairly high stress level because, you feel the responsibility for the design, and you take it home with you. You're always thinking about it. You don't stop. For me anyway, and a lot of designers, I think that, there's always problems. There's always things you're trying to work through with the design. So you take it home and you think about it. You lie in bed, you think about it. I wake up in the middle of the night and I think about it. And that's just kind of how the job is. And I think that I still think it's the greatest job in the world. But I think that you have to have, you don't have to, but I think that it helps when you have a certain makeup where you don't turn things off. You can't, or you won't, or, I think that this kind of, to me, that kind of just goes with the territory.
So what kept you awake thinking about the design of Enemy Unknown? What were some of the things that you noticed after release that you wish you had more time with?
Well, a lot of you, I was kept awake during the development of Enemy Unknown, and then after it came out, I think what you think about is you put it out there, and then you get this rush of feedback because a lot of people play the game before it comes out, but it's not comparable to millions of people playing the game after it comes out. And then some really strong themes emerge from the feedback. And Sid Meier, he's a guy, I don't know, you probably haven't heard of him, but whatever. Sid Meier, he's a guy that I work for. And I remember he told me one time, he said, feedback is fact, and that's how you have to look at it. And a designer is your job is never to defend your work. That is absolutely counter to what your job is. Your job is not to defend the work you've done. Your job is to listen to people and their interpretation of the design and the gameplay, and you simply just absorb that. And if you see certain patterns emerging, or if certain things people say sort of jive with what you feel, then your job is to just say, you're right, let me think about that. And so you see pattern after a game comes out, you get millions of people playing it, you see these patterns emerge, and you go, oh, you're right, you know what, we could have done a better job of that. And I think that on Enemy Unknown, it goes into, you're making something for the first time, and I think there's a lot of fear that we felt about, okay, how controlled should this experience be? Like, how off the rails can XCOM get? You can lose soldiers, you can have these experiences that are not, or at least at that point they weren't that typical in games, or at least they weren't mainstream. And so we worried about that. And so I think we held on pretty tightly to the experience and made sure everything was balanced very, very tightly, and there wasn't as much unpredictability. And I think what that meant is that people would play the game multiple times, but they could sort of see the pattern, and they could sort of see our hand on the design, which with a game of XCOM, what you want is for the players to feel like it's more dynamic, that it's more free form. And so I think that was one of the big things that sort of sat pretty heavily on my mind and other people on the team's mind, is how can we you don't want your handprints to be on the design. More cultivated games, certainly that makes sense. It's more of an artistic thing, or it's more of an experience you're trying to create. But XCOM is a game about systems, and you really don't want your handprints on that. You want you want the player to feel like they're the one steering it. You want it to feel dynamic. So, oh my God, I talk so much. Sorry.
No, that's what you're here for, man. It's good. So, did you get that from feedback then? Did you kind of hope that people would embrace the freedom of XCOM, and you saw that, okay, now we have the room to be more bold with this in the sequel?
Yeah, and I think I feel like we didn't know, we didn't know what the best way to do it was. Should we tightly control this, or is the best experience one where things kind of break down and crazy things start to happen? And I think as we played, we started to get a sense of the latter, it's really fun when all of a sudden everything goes to hell, and all of a sudden you're catching fire and all this crazy stuff's happening. But then you want that validated by your actual players. And I think that that's what emerged is that feeling. And so we definitely got a sense of okay, we have the opportunity here to take our hands off the reins, to put a little more unpredictability into the experience for players. And, then of course when we started playing, XCOM 2. We all really, really enjoyed it because, obviously internally we've put as many hours into XCOM as anybody. So for us, when we started being like, you know what, finish a game, be like, I'm just gonna start playing again. We'd be able to play over and over, and we didn't get tired of it. That for us was a really good sign.
Definitely. So one of my favorite things that you've done outside of XCOM, obviously, and outside of that awesome pitch video where you're at a GameStop trying to sell XCOM, which look it up if you haven't seen it. It is brilliant. Is you had a great video during the Double Fine Massive Chalice Kickstarter where you sat down with Brad Muir over Skype and just talked about his early ideas for that XCOM inspired game and what you would think of it. And you had a great line in that video where you talked about the state of unreasonable optimism. I forget exactly how you phrased it.
Oh, well, wait, was it about game development?
It was about game development and like the Valley of Doom versus the state of unreasonable optimism.
Yeah.
What is this? How does that theory go?
Yeah, I mean, you're basically vacillating between the two states. You start a project with this sort of, and I don't remember how I put it, but you sort of start, when you start a project, just like any new endeavor, you started in this state of unjustified optimism, where you say, this game is going to be the greatest game that anyone has ever seen. And we're going to do all these things. And you forget, or at least and I think this is how people should start creative endeavors. You think about the positives and you don't worry about the roadblocks. There's no point in barring trouble. But yeah, all developers start in this sort of state of completely unreasonable optimism. And then eventually the realities kick in and you realize your ideas never hold water. They're never that good. Your first ideas are never that good. And then all the realities of development kick in, and there are technical problems and there are content problems, whatever it is. And then you transition to something that Sid, he coins the Valley of Despair. So then you end up in the Valley of Despair, and Sid is always, this is going to make Sid sound cynical, which he absolutely isn't. But Sid's known for this statement about game design, where he says, games are a series of interesting choices. And one time we were working on Civ Rev, Civilization Revolution. He and I were working on that game together, and he said, if games are a series of interesting choices, he's like, making games is a series of heartbreaking disappointments. And I thought, yes, I think that's kind of you operate in this complete, like you go from really, really optimistic, and then you have all these things happen, and then you go back to really optimistic. And I think it's the same for every creative endeavor, is you just, like I was talking about before, where you go like, oh, this is terrible. I'm a terrible designer. I'm a fraud. Everybody knows that. Everybody's going to see this and think what a fraud I am. And then eventually you just work and you work and you work and you work, and you don't stop and you don't give up, and you just kill yourself, and the team just works really hard. And then you get to a point and you're like, you know what? I think this time it's actually going to work out. And of course, a lot of times it does work out. It's just, I don't know. I think that's the psychology of creating stuff. So, I mean, I wonder, does that actually happen when you guys are making a book? Does that actually happen? Like, every book, do you start out and like you have these sort of valleys, and do you guys call them books?
We do internally. Yeah. It's rare to hear somebody outside of the Informer call them.
Yeah.
Right. So when you guys are doing that, do you guys have those sorts of now they would be micro, and I don't know if it's like divided up among the different people doing different features and stuff like that, but do you have this sort of like, this thing's going to be great, and then like, oh my God, the reality sets in, you get all these setbacks, but then eventually, like right when it launches, you're like, this thing's perfect.
Yeah, it depends on, editor to editor, and then also it's mostly, I think, feature to feature. It'll be something like maybe we create like our top 50 games of the year, or our best picks for E3, or maybe even a more involved like feature with like more of a point to it. And you have this like, oh, this is such a great idea, and you put a lot of work into it, and you definitely go through those peaks and valleys for sure. And I think the feedback is more immediate when you do something online, obviously.
Then people tell you suck directly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. It works out really well.
Then you get no middleman. You just get that feedback right away.
Yep.
Well, because I was really curious about what you were working on and whether or not Firaxis was going to go along with an XCOM 2 or sequel to XCOM Enemy Unknown, I took note of this. I favorited this tweet, Jake, from September 25th, 2013. You wrote, "In need of humility, play the first implementation of your design. It's bad. You're bad. Jesus wept." Can you tell us where you were at with XCOM 2 back then?
Yes, that is. I'm sure that is in reference to one of my probably many design ideas that just right out of the gate, it's like it looks like this shining stallion, and then right out of the gate it falls down and breaks its neck. I mean, I think that's what it's like. What a lot of design ideas are, and you get to a point, it's funny. And it's absolutely true, and that it doesn't bother me. And now it's easy for me to say that because I'm older, and I have gone through product cycles, and I've had some success as a designer, and so it's easier to fall back when you're older, and you've had moments where sure you have lots of setbacks, and then you have some successes, and then you always get this perspective, and that helps. But I think that. A lot of times it's just the case, and I tell people all the time, if somebody's response to a design idea is, I don't know, I don't think that's that good, that's not going to work, they're going to be right 80% of the time. I mean, it doesn't make them a genius, it kind of makes them an asshole, but the fact is, it's true. I mean, I think a lot of times you say, hey, I've got this idea, and they always pass the sound test where I'll say that to somebody else, or another designer will tell me an idea, and you say like, oh, that sounds really cool. And then there are so many subtleties to the player experience, to how it's messaged to the player, to the way it integrates with the other systems, that you put something in and you're like, this does not elicit at all what I was hoping for. And it's absolutely true. You say, this is going to be so awesome, and then it goes in and you're like, man, why did I not see that this was the dumbest idea anyone ever had? So, and then you just chip away at it, and yeah, again, your personality, it just never shuts off. You go home with that. And Jen, my wife, she'll know when I have days like that. She will absolutely know, because I'll be sitting there and I'll just be like 1,000 yards stare, and she'll be like, how was your day? And I'll say, oh, not so good. And that's just, that's just kind of how the job goes. But yeah, I got to be careful what I put out on Twitter, huh? I guess.
No.
That was a gem.
Yeah. So you talk about like chipping away at the game. Is it fair to say that XCOM 2 was originally much bigger and much bolder, and then you whittle it down to this basic tenet that might look more similar to Enemy Unknown than you thought it would?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair, although it's not. I think it's always kind of what I was aiming for. You kind of say like, all right, we're gonna, when you have something like Enemy Unknown, you always want to then take an iterative step forward. Like, you don't want to abandon everything, because then what would be the point of that? But the idea is that I think what you do is not necessarily you make things bigger, but you just try a lot of things, and they don't work with systems you had before or new systems that you're adding in, and you try a lot of these things, and what happens is that you basically change them, and you don't really lose like the size and the scope of your original vision, although certainly that happens. But what happens is that a lot of times you sort of throw all these things out there, and it's just this cloud, it's this mass, and you really slowly sort of like get you start weaving these things together, and it's like it's like basically you're sort of weaving these things together into a thread. So you've got all these disparate threads of ideas, and it's basically a mess. And you're trying to, I don't know what my analogy is here. You're trying to make a shirt. I don't know what I'm talking about, but the idea is, design is like a shirt. Design is like weaving a shirt. Hey, let me tell you something, kids. Design is like weaving a shirt, okay? What the hell am I talking about? Look, what I'm saying is, yeah, you have all these ideas, and you basically, you need to pull them together, and they need to play off each other. And because of that, the game ends up taking this shape. But with something that's a sequel, it's always built around the same core, so it's always going to be somewhat like the original. But when things take shape, they push on everything, and like basic, you end up changing some of the underlying core mechanics. I mean, in XCOM 2, we've got procedural maps, and we've got these, you got mission objectives, you got all these things. So you sort of start altering the core, but definitely what you get to the finish line with is never what you're really thinking about, I think, at the start. But although, I don't know that any not too much high level stuff changed or didn't work out on XCOM 2. It's just all really the details of how this stuff works out together.
Yeah, definitely. By the way, one of the things I love most when XCOM 2 was announced was just the fact that you guys called it XCOM 2.
Yeah, thank you. It makes it so much easier to talk about. Oh my God.
It's great. There's no colon like, the Rising Terror or some crap like that. You're automatically going to forget. Are you involved in the naming of that? Is that all a publisher thing? How does that come down?
No, I mean, the publisher has to approve of it. I actually remember that distinctly. I think we talked about that, and we were kind of like talking about that internally, and we're like, gosh, what do we want to call it? And it was like, well, XCOM's always like, XCOM, what is it going to be? Rebellion, or I don't know. And I think when we started doing that, we started saying like, well, this is really kind of confusing, and people like Google that, or when we're talking about it, it's going to be difficult to use another colon after, there's so many different XCOM titles. And so we were like, hey, one day we just had the idea like, what if it's, I don't know, I'm crazy here, I'm just spitballing here, but what if we call it XCOM 2? I don't know why I keep using that voice over and over again, but I'll try to use a different accent.
It's a good character. Time. It's a shirtman and it's a title man.
You know what it sounds like? It sounds like a story you told us about a writer for the first XCOM Enemy Unknown. I don't know if you remember that saga. You're talking about there was a consulting writer that helped pitch in with Enemy Unknown.
I do remember, yeah.
Okay.
I do remember. Yeah, it was, all right, listen to me, kids. What you need here? Well, and we had, you know what, this is actually, we had a guy, and he still helps us out. There's actually a guy from 2K. His name is Jack Scalisi. And so, maybe that's who I was talking about. We've got this guy. He's the best. He's sort of like a creative director at 2K. And so he helps us with a lot of our stuff and cinematics and voice and all these things. But yeah, you would never expect that he's this video game like creative guy, but he is this like solid, like 250-pound New York Italian guy, and he talks just like that. So yeah,
I remember you were talking.
That's what I'm channeling. Yeah, and his name is Jack Scalisi. How can you go wrong?
That's perfect.
It's a really good name. I remember you were talking about him reading the screen, be like, you got some satellites, got some aliens and shit. I don't know what's going on here.
What is this nerd stuff here? What is this? What are these guys? What are these aliens?
It's like a cartoon cigar chomping executive, basically. Talking about sci-fi.
It's basically with the Al Capone.
Yeah, it's good.
Talking about a turn-based strategy game, as we all envision.
Heard about aliens? You kids like aliens? Get over here.
All right, so playing XCOM 2 in development, which you hinted at a little bit before, like what are the other big things that stand out to you that feel drastically different from Enemy Unknown?
I think that there's like a couple of things, and some of them are game design, and some of them are completely unrelated. I mean, I think the feeling of playing is the unpredictable stuff is good. So you play, in tactical missions, you just have these experiences that are really funny, and funny things happen, and you can't really predict how they're going to go. And a lot of that is, the missions, who can be on the missions. And we've got things like, they're small things, but, floors are destructible now. So sometimes your units will the floor will burn and aliens will fall to their death. Or, these great moments where we've got this ability, and, we've got rangers with swords now, and they've got this ability. If anybody moves close to them, they'll attack them with their sword. And there's a case where the roof collapsed, and a Viper fell through, and she landed right next to my Ranger, and the Ranger was like, nice, and sliced him. So you get all these great, unpredictable moments in tactical, and in strategy, it's more unpredictable. And then I think one of the things that's really, really, really different is soldier customization, and that's one of those things that we pushed really hard, and I was never sure. It was interesting because I always wondered how much soldier customization. I always really liked it in Enemy Unknown, and so we thought naturally we'll just make it really crazy in XCOM 2. But it's actually worked out really well, and that's mostly, that really is all the result of the content guys, the artists, and so you can make characters that look really distinct, and our proportions are really realistic now. So you get these great looking characters that have you can put scars across their face, and you can all this minute customization stuff to your soldiers, and that to me
good.
Always
so
feels...
we can get even closer to them than ever. Basically, is what you're just setting them all players up just to get way too close to these characters with this
before
customization.
They die. Yes, of course.
You can make it look exactly like your first girlfriend, and it's going to be spot on.
Oh, that sounds.
That's right. Well, now, and I don't know if you guys know about there's a feature that we just started talking about, which is the character pool. And the idea is now because for exactly the reason you raised there, this idea came out of this because we had all this customization, and then it's like you spend a lot of time, and then now that the character dies, and so what we actually have is this thing called the character pool, and it exists outside of any game, outside of a single player game, and so all it is a giant pool of customized characters that you've made, and then you can mark them up and say, hey, I want this person to show up in my game as a soldier. I want this person to show up as a scientist or an engineer, or I want this person to show up as a bad guy in my game. And so anybody you customize, you can be in your single player game, you customize a soldier and they look really awesome. All you do is you hit a button that's like put them in the character pool, and they'll be saved forever and they'll show up in future games. But you can also like customize, you can make your family and your friends and you make them in the pool, and that way they're always there and they'll show up in your future games, and they can show up as like, you can make your mom like she's a scientist, and then so you'll be playing the game and the mission will come up and it'll be like, all right, we're going in to rescue Dr. Nancy Solomon, who has developed a new whatever, and it's your mom, and you're like, oh my God, I've got to go save my mom. So it's like a really fun feature, but it also helps the fact that because customization is pushed so much further now that we're preventing the player from having to redo that a lot of times, or if somebody dies, they're always saved sort of in the character pool.
It's great. It's obviously like the most memorable stories that anyone remembered or shared with other people from the first XCOM that you guys made was just these emergent things that happened, their own personal stories. So leaning into that to let people just make even more personal stories, it seems like a really smart move, and yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, we're at the stage, obviously, of development where the team is, the game's been played through many times by people on the team, and that's always something and it reminds me of Enemy Unknown, but this is happening earlier now. Is that people on the team they finish the game. And then a lot of times what they'll send to me with feedback, they'll be like, hey, I like this, can we change this? With feedback, they'll also send me pictures of, their soldiers, and I love this guy. And these are developers. These are people who've been working on the game for years, but they've seen it. They've seen these customization options. They know how this design works, but then when they get in there, they are attaching. And so I think that does, to me, it's always really neat to see is that I think like the team did an awesome job with the customization, and it definitely works. Like you definitely see even internally, we all have a developer character pool right now. So when you play internally, you get all of our like fellow like XCOM team members like showing up as characters and stuff like that. So it's great because people call you over and be like, hey, you just totally ruined me. Like, nice job missing that shot. Now we're all dead. Everybody give Jake a hand here. Hey, you just ruined my...
Here he is.
I did it
He's
again.
back.
Hey, get over here. Hey, smart pants. Get over here. Yeah.
So something that's interesting with the premise of XCOM 2 is aliens have taken over the world, and now you're on the offense, and you're this ragtag group of XCOM, and you're leading attacks on the big alien cities and whatnot. And I'm wondering, does that like change the tone of the game? Does it make it less scary or less atmospheric when you don't know? Like if you're on the offense, I just wonder if that has an impact mission to mission on the tension in the maps.
That's a good question. I think that the tone of, that's a good question. It's like a more high level question of what kind of tension it is. And that's something that, to be honest with you, I haven't given much thought since we originally came up with the setting. And so I think there is something inherently maybe spookier about some of the missions in Enemy Unknown, perhaps because of, I think you're right, maybe because of the setting. And then in XCOM 2, the feeling is a little more desperate. And I think we've done a better job, a considerably better job of getting across some sort of, some world building stuff. So you'll go into missions in XCOM 2 and we'll have kiosks, and it will be like there'll be like wanted posters, and it will be your actual, like we take screenshots of all of your soldiers and we automatically will put their heads onto the wanted posters. And so we have all these little touches of this sort of futuristic world. But you're right. I mean, I think the feeling, obviously the underlying tension of what XCOM is, that's still there. You're still going to lose soldiers. Your mistakes still have real cost to them. And so that tension's there. But now the feeling, I suppose, is a little more desperate. And it's interesting because you go into some environments where they're not as recognizable as Earth, some of these new city centers and things like that. And the feeling definitely is a little bit different, I suppose, in that regard. And yeah, I mean, it goes down to those minute things. They sort of all fold in from the overall setting of, okay, this isn't the Earth that you know. This is the Earth this is sort of a dystopian take on the Earth of the near future.
Well, I guess, Earth has come a long way since Enemy Unknown, because now the enemy is literally very well known.
Mm-hmm. Very well.
Yeah, humanity is unknown.
Yeah,
famous.
Yeah.
So I gotta wonder, like, was the pitch for XCOM 2 influenced at all by kind of the rise of the survival genre, especially on Steam? There's so many games where it's like, oh, you're hunting for scraps. You're all that's left. It all comes down to you. And it seems like XCOM's kind of pulling a little bit from that now. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely. I don't think we weren't influenced that on the mechanic side, although thematically, perhaps. I mean, yeah, I mean, man, survival games have exploded. I mean, I'm still obsessed with Minecraft. But yeah, it's crazy. You go to look at early access and you're like, I have no idea I am looking at a sea of survival. But yeah, you know what? I'm going to try that dinosaur combat game. I have not. Have you guys tried that?
Ark Survival Evolved? I tried it and it ran like shit, and I haven't gone back to it since. But now, like, millions of people are playing it. It seems like there's cool stuff happening.
I know. I love it. I saw that and I was like, I keep seeing it come up and I'm like, yes, somebody has done it. There's a dinosaur combat game out there and I want to try it. So, yeah, totally off topic there. Yeah, I mean, really the idea for the setting for XCOM 2 just sort of came out of the idea of it just, one, we never wanted to do a linear narrative. I think that for us required too much hand waving about like, well, you won, but now all your guns are broken, or you ran out of bullets, and so ran out of future bullets, so whatever it is. And I think the setting was one that I always loved the idea, and I think it's integral to the idea of what XCOM is this sort of idea of struggle and facing these overwhelming odds. And so the idea of being a resistance group was really, really intriguing. And I suppose there are a couple things like that. I guess Falling Skies, which I've never seen, but that's like a TV show where it's a that's like, aliens banding together against, humans banding together against aliens or something like that. But yeah, I mean, I think the idea came out of the idea of loss just kind of makes, it's just kind of a thread that goes through XCOM. And for us, we thought, well, if we make that the central theme, if we basically say, oh yeah, we embrace the idea of loss. In fact, so much so that the sequel is about the story where you actually lost the first one. It didn't come out of the idea of just trying to be clever or anything, but it really just, to us, it just sort of felt the idea that the player has to start in this really big hole and they're facing these overwhelming odds, and that's the best place for XCOM to be. Plus, I don't know, I think that it's been interesting to move into a future setting. It's not very futuristic, it's near future, and we've tried to keep it as grounded as possible. But to me, it just felt like too much to make an XCOM game that wasn't rooted in conventional tech. And I think that for me, it just felt too far out there to do something like that. And so I think we wanted to stick around conventional type gear. And so you could look at your soldiers and be like, yeah, I recognize them. Those are the kinds of people I know. So yeah, I think the idea just sort of fell out of that.
Sure. I mean, you mentioned how you haven't seen Falling Skies, but clearly somebody over there is a fan of you guys, because I take it you saw that game Falling Skies that came out last year.
I did have that, that's the sort of thing that people like to send to me. I mean, when that came out, yeah, I think I got a few emails about that, and I was like, oh well, I guess what is it? A rising tide lifts all boats. Whatever. I don't. Does that phrase even make sense? Hey, rising tide lifts all boats. I don't know.
You can say anything with that
guy would say, but I don't know. I don't know. Maybe that guy's the designer over there. Hey, you like? I can do aliens. I do aliens. You like that? I'll give you some cover shields. Whatever you nerds like.
If you haven't seen it, you can look up YouTube video of this Falling Skies game, because it looks very, 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 very similar to Enemy Unknown in a flattering way, I'd assume.
Yeah. Hey. Yeah. I mean, I think Well, it's to me, I've talked to some people on the team about this, is that anything, like, we never view any sort of, and I don't even know if that game is turn-based, but for us, like, it's exciting for us to see. There are a lot of really great turn-based tactics games, Incognito and Massive Chalice and things like that. And for us, I don't know, we're just really big fans. Obviously, we like the genre, and for us, we're super excited to see titles like that because, who knows? Someday that may be bigger than shooters. No, that's probably not going to happen. But for us, like, we're always excited to see other games like that.
Yeah, definitely. So I heard you mention in a previous interview that in XCOM 2, the aliens have their own win condition.
Yes.
And what does that mean exactly? How does that change anything that the players are experiencing?
I don't know. I just said that. No, what does that mean? Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So part of making the game a little more dynamic means that the aliens now, in Enemy Unknown, it was sort of, the world was panicking, and everything rose at a pretty consistent rate. And there are elements of that remain for XCOM 2, but the idea is that the aliens have short-term goals that they want to accomplish, and then they have long-term goals. And so their long-term goal is their win condition, and they can do different things to advance their win condition. But that is fairly systemic how they approach that. But it's not at all like, the player has ways of preventing that, but the aliens also have these short-term goals where they say, hey, we're going to do this thing. We're going to send a UFO out to hunt XCOM, or we are going to hide faceless aliens on the map now. So, we've got civilians until you close to them, and then they transform into huge towering monsters. And so it's going to say, like, you know what, we're going to hide a bunch of extra faceless aliens on the maps. And so the player has ways to stop those as well, but that costs. And so the players, like, they have their own short-term goals. They have their own long-term goals. The aliens have long-term goals and short-term goals. And so the player has to sort of juggle all those things and say, at what point do I get worried about this? At what point should I do something about that? And so it just sort of creates a more open experience. And random events can occur that will then, hey, maybe push the alien a lot closer to their long-term goals or complete a short-term goal. And so it just creates a lot of, it's XCOM in the sense that there are a lot of balls in the air. And I think in the strategy game now, there are a lot more balls in the air for the player to say, okay, I've got to manage all these things, and I've got to prioritize what it is I want to do.
It seems like it'd be more ripe for something like having some sort of versus multiplayer within the campaign itself, where one person's playing the aliens. Did you guys consider that at all?
I think that would be awesome, but to be honest with you, I've never really seriously considered, just because the amount of work that I think would be really challenging to make fun for both sides. But I mean, I do love the idea, and I think that's something, it's the idea of being the aliens. Although, I'm gonna sound like a Debbie Downer here, so just forgive me for this, okay? But I have thought about this a lot, because people always come to you and say, like, why not a game where I can play as the aliens, right? And this isn't exactly your question, but it is, one thing that falls out of that is, people ask, like, why can't I play? What if we did a game where I played as the aliens? And I always think to myself, I think that would work for a limited period of time. I think it would work multiplayer, because you're playing against somebody, and I think that could be engaging. But otherwise, when you're playing as the aliens, I think it's harder for you to make some sort of emotional connection to, like, Gleep Glop the Fourth or whatever your alien characters are and your motivations. And I think it gets a little harder to connect with that sort of experience. So I think that would be difficult. But I think as multiplayer could work, but man, that would be challenging. You would have to. I mean, you're talking about like a 20-hour campaign where you've got, like, somebody playing aliens. But yeah, I suppose people would drop in and out, and that'd be.
I guess invasion is kind of hot in game. I mean, we talked about Dark Souls earlier, but now even Metal Gear has a type of invasion in it.
So they can just play like one match against you. Type of thing?
You're seeing that bleed into, like, single player driven campaigns more and more. But Yeah.
It's called mingle player, Tim.
Is that what it's called? Is that the term?
It's a really dumb term, but it's what some call it.
Massively mingle player. Yes.
So, do you guys consider the multiplayer section of Enemy Unknown a success?
Oh, I mean, I think yeah, I mean, I suppose, because, you know, what we're trying to set out to do is with multiplayer, create some, a fun mode to experience the game. Like, we want people to be able to skirmish as aliens, and we want people, like, it's really fun being able to take control of the aliens in the single player. And so for us, basically, we wanted to make, we started XCOM Enemy Unknown with, like, when we were first designing that, we were looking at like miniature games and things like that. And that's where the idea for multiplayer came out. So we're like, we could very easily turn this into a little miniature skirmish game. And so in that regard, yeah, it's a success. But I don't view it as like, for us, the single player drives virtually all decisions. It drives virtually all decisions because that's where our audience is. Mm-hmm. I mean, I suppose you could, we thought about if we really wanted to push multiplayer, you could turn it into something else. But for us, because that's not where our audience is, and it's not clear to me necessarily how to make XCOM multiplayer, work differently than it does. You could do things like simultaneous turns. There are ways to do that. But for us, the value is probably not there as much as it is focusing on the single player game. So, yeah, I mean, it's, I think it's successful in what it does.
Sure.
But yeah, for us, the focus is always going to be single player is going to drive decision making.
Do you have a multiplayer mode for XCOM 2? I guess I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Cool.
And it's actually improved over Enemy Unknown because just like the rest of XCOM 2, it benefits from procedural maps and things like that. So it's definitely different from the multiplayer in Enemy Unknown, but it's mechanically, it's relatively similar.
Gotcha. So XCOM 2, PC exclusive. What's interesting about that is you guys are pushing so hard for what PC players love. Specifically, it seems like, I mean, obviously there's like addition of loot. So everybody loves loot, I guess. But then beyond that, you're also pushing big for mod support and you want players to stream it. Can you talk about that initiative? Is it just with XCOM 2 or do you think it's with all Firaxis projects moving forward?
I think it's with all Firaxis projects moving forward. I mean, for us, like that's obviously the roots of Firaxis. We have, we're doing, hey, time for a plug, but we have FiraxisCon this weekend, and it's like we have this very loyal audience, and it's we've got a huge base in PC, and what we saw, obviously developing Civ in-house, there's this huge, like the modding support that Civ does is a very, very big, it's a very, very, very big part of the community and keeping the game relevant for a long period of time. And so things like that, they're just very, very important to us. Is we have an international audience, we have a large PC audience. And so for us, I think you think about, I love, like, this is a golden age of PC gaming. When you think about things like early access and you think about all the neat things people are doing, when you think about streaming, which can happen on all platforms. But yeah, I think for us, that's definitely something that going forward, like we love the idea of sort of empowering our players to play with the tools that we have and to allow them to have these experiences that they can stream. And so, yeah, for us, I think that's just how things are going to be going forward.
So how do you court the streaming community other than just putting PewDiePie in your game as an alien or something like that?
Oh my God, we haven't done that.
Yeah, you're really behind the ball.
You know what? I'm going to, if that works, I'll give you half of all profits. I think you have to, obviously the game has to be suited for that. So I think having it, and obviously this is not why we wanted to make XCOM more unpredictable, but that helps, right? If it's entertaining to watch the game, and that means that the game itself has to generate content, not content in a traditional way, but it has to generate interesting content. It has to generate value just by playing a game. If it has different experiences, if the player playing it can have different experiences than I've had personally, then that's generating value. And so I think that's things that systems-based games and games that have more procedural generation or dynamic content, they're obviously going to benefit far more from streaming, because that allows those games to generate interesting content for the person who's streaming, to say like, oh, this is funny, look at that, or I can tell you a story about my playthrough that is different from yours. And so I think then if you're a fan of the game, you can watch somebody else play it, and it's interesting in that regard. And so I think that's where something like XCOM makes sense for streaming. Yeah, I mean, I think that you just make a game that I think people can, that is interesting to watch, I suppose. And I think that just sort of aligns. But outside of that, yeah, maybe you just send out a shitload of free copies or something.
So talk about the game being exclusive to PC. I guess I haven't heard, is it controller supported still, or is that also gone then in the PC version?
No, I don't think that. No, we're still obviously that's something that interests us, but that's not that right now is not something that we're officially supporting.
Gotcha. And the official stance for the possibility of it coming to consoles is
that I can tell you the true stance, which is that I have not devoted any thought to that. Which doesn't mean that, it's not that we're not open to the idea, but at this point, all we're focusing on, especially at this stage of the project, is just making the best game we can for PC.
Yeah, definitely. So
that sounded very marketing-y, but I didn't mean it to. That's actually, maybe it sounded marketing because it's a true statement. Well, yeah, it's a totally true statement.
And all marketing is truth.
Yeah, and all marketing is true, as we all know. And hold on while I enjoy this delicious Fresca. Fresca, the taste of our times. Anyway,
so the game was recently delayed to 2016. You want to explain where you're at in the development, why the delay happened, what's going on over there?
Yeah, because Fresca. No, I don't know. Yeah, it's one of those things where we're in a position where we've shown a lot of the game, and so people can everything we've shown, the game's in a great place, and we've beaten it a bunch of times, and so you just get to a point where we really are focused on polish, and we just needed the extra time to basically work on polishing the game, bug fixing. We didn't make any design changes or systemic changes or anything like that. It was just a case of we got to a certain point and we're like, hey, we want to devote a little more time to polish, and we're sort of blessed to have a publisher who, for them, like quality, like the quality of the title is really important. And so it's an easy conversation to say, hey, look, everybody's having a lot of fun, but we've got this polished stuff we want to focus on. And so that's basically the reason why. To February 5th.
Oh, it's not too far away. That's a piece of cake. No. Yeah, you want to just plug Firaxicon? That's coming up this weekend, right?
I do. Yes, Firaxicon, which is actually really cool. The first time we did it was last year, and it's this weekend. It's October 3rd, and it's at the Baltimore Convention Center. And I guess it's double in size from last year, and it was awesome last year because you get to meet with people. It's just a really positive thing, and we're not selling anything. You're just kind of meeting with people, and we play board games. We have this big room where everybody's playing board games, and then we have all these panels where we talk about stuff, and you get to meet with people. And the neatest thing for me last year was when Sid came, and all these people were talking to Sid about the impact that he's had on their lives, and it was really, really neat. Of course, Sid's made so many games. He made Railroad Tycoon, and he made Civilization. Pirates. He's made so many incredible games. And then I thought about it, and I was like, wow, Sid's games have all educated people. All these people are like, your game made me a professor, or I now teach whatever. And I was like, let's see, XCOM's about aliens, so invading Earth. I don't know that maybe I'm not inspiring any teachers, but yeah. It was really neat, and I think that just being around your audience and getting to interact with them on a personal level, it's kind of like what PAX is like, but it's very focused. So yeah, pretty excited for that this weekend.
Awesome. Does Sid Meier enjoy that kind of fandom? Just getting swarmed by people asking for autographs, or?
No, he doesn't. He doesn't dislike it. But Sid is the most humble. He's the most humble guy. The guy does not have to work, I'm sure. But he works as hard as anybody. This weekend on Sunday, you see him pulling into the parking lot, and he's he works all the time, and not because he's crunching or anything. He works all the time because he really loves to do it, and he's very humble, very, very nice guy, very nice guy. Yeah, he's a really neat guy. And so for him, he would never, if you met him, he would never tell you, I'm Sid Meier. I mean, he would he'd keep that to himself, and he's a very quiet, humble guy. So yeah, I mean, it's not that he doesn't like interacting with fans, because he does, but he just yeah, I remember when I showed up last year, I waited outside, and then I walked him inside, and then when I did, it was like you could just see all these people just like closing ranks on him just to sort of talk to him, and I was afraid they were gonna start ripping off his clothes or something, but and sell them as artifacts. Oh, heal your blindness. I don't know. That's probably didn't happen. So, but yeah, I mean, Sid's definitely not one of those guys who's gonna get up there and be full of ego. He's a really humble guy. For all that he's done, he's pretty humble.
Yeah, definitely. Do you see yourself as what Sid is to Civ? Do you see yourself for XCOM? Would you like to be the shepherd of XCOM moving into the future then?
Yeah, I mean, I could never compare myself to Sid and Civilization, but certainly, design-wise, it's funny. I am, I'm so blessed to have this job and to work at Fraxis. I've worked here for almost 16 years now. It's the only job I've ever had, is working at Fraxis. Yeah, I mean, a lot of, obviously, the reason why XCOM, when it has success, it's due to the huge team that works on it, and I get to be the guy that a lot of times gets to sit out in front of it and act like oh yes, we knew that was going to be a great idea. It was my idea. And a lot of times, vast majority of the times, the ideas are not my ideas. But in terms of shepherding, yeah, I mean, I am, to put up another one of my strange analogies, like I seriously am one of those guys who can, like, if I like something, I like something. I like it. I don't sit there and I don't worry about like, oh, I wonder if this would be better, or oh, I wish I was doing something different. When I enjoy something, I try not to take anything for granted. And so, like, I would be absolutely thrilled. I mean this from the bottom of my heart. I would be absolutely thrilled if 30 years from now I'm on XCOM 17 or whatever that would be. If I'm still there and I'm like, hey, is that Ben? Tim? Yeah,
it's talking to a can.
Sound that old at 68, but you never know. I'm so thrilled. But yeah, I would be. I mean, I continue to have, and I think part of the idea is that XCOM's a great platform for stories, and it's a great platform for a lot of different types of games. But I think that there's just so much there that I probably have ideas for 50 XCOMs. I have them all written down somewhere. So yeah, in terms of shepherding the franchise, it's something that I've enjoyed so far, being in my role with the team, and it's something that I would love to do in the future. I'd eat the same thing. I'm like Elvis. I'd eat the same thing every night if I could.
It's interesting.
That's me.
I remember you were also a huge Grand Theft Auto fan, and there's so many other games that you must be a huge fan of, but you don't have any temptation to work on something like that, a little more action focused?
No, and I think it probably goes back to the old the fear of being exposed as a fraud. Because if I want to, I am so impressed by, GTA to me is it is so impressive that the kind of vision that they have for something that's so big, and that is actually I think so consistent in terms of creative vision and how groundbreaking all the stuff they do is. And they work. I'm under the same publisher as those guys, right? Like Take-Two. So I'm always. That's always nice perspective too, because those guys, I don't know how many games they've sold to 60 million, whatever it is, whatever the numbers of games they've sold are. So you always gives you a little perspective as a designer. You can be like, oh, whatever they say is probably best. Why don't we just do whatever they? So yeah, if they came and were like, you're working on this now, I'd be like, oh, okay, all right, Mr. Hauser, I will. I'll get to work on that.
Sid's like, what the hell are you doing? Why are you listening to Dan Hauser?
Right. Yeah, no, I actually have. It's funny because I love there's when I was working on XCOM, I used to listen to this I used to listen to this music, and it's just like 70s electronica. When I listened to, and I was always really thrilled with them. I thought they sounded a lot like XCOM. And so then when I went and played GTA 5, and I'm installing it on my 360, and I'm listening to this loading screen music, and I'm like, wow. I'm like, man, that sounds awesome. And sure enough, it's this 70s electronica German music band. And these guys are like so forward thinking that like they already know like whatever you think is cool. Like these guys thought was cool like 5 years before. And that's how it always is with those guys. Like I just think, I think they're geniuses. But in terms of working on something, I think in terms of working on something else, I don't know. To me, that's not, I mean, there's look, you're a creative person. You like those ideas. But to me, I just feel like there's still so much. So, yeah, I don't know. It doesn't cross my mind too much.
Sounds good. Well, hey, we should let you go. Get back to work on XCOM 2, right?
And I feel bad. I feel like I talked like the whole time. Do you guys talk more than this?
It's almost like we had you on the Game Informer show as a guest because we wanted to talk to you and hear you talk a lot.
Yeah,
you should not feel bad about that. Everyone got to hear us the rest of the show. So,
okay, well,
welcome.
It's called the Game Informer. I mean, it's not, So yes, all right. I just want to know that. I just want you to know I feel terrible. So
no, do not. You're welcome to guest host this show whenever you want, Jake. Honestly,
that's right.
That would be a blast.
Yeah,
you're welcome whenever you want, man.
If you guys can cut half of the stuff I said in post, just feel free.
Here's Jake Solomon talking about GTA 5. Everybody, all right, see ya.
That's right.
No, but again, perfect.
Right.
Thank you so much, man.
Thank you very much for having me. I'd be thrilled to come on anytime. So thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, for sure. Have a good time for XCon, and people can Google it, find tickets for this weekend, and go out there and say hi to him in person.
Yes, please do.
Cool. All right, that's it for the Game Informer show. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week. Bye.